After that, Patriarch Alzio and Mo Jianli began to discuss some finer details in preparation for the battle against the devilish army. During this time, they would occasionally ask for Han Li's opinion, clearly making an effort to include him in the discussion. Han Li was aware that he couldn't compare with these two grand ascension stage beings when it came to tactical acumen in battles that concerned several races, so he didn't take the initiative to interject and only offered his opinions when requested to do so. Taoist Zai and Silvermoon were also in the hall, but both of them were completely expressionless and disinterested. As for Zhu Gyur, she was standing off to the side in an obedient manner. Thus, time slowly passed by, and Han Li stayed in Mo Jianli's cave abode for close to half a day before the discussion finally drew to a conclusion. Patriarch Alzio departed with Silvermoon first, while Mo Jianli and Han Li chatted for a while longer before the former summoned one of his disciples to organize a temporary place for Han Li to stay. The disciple naturally did as he was told in a respectful manner, setting up a pavilion that was situated on a branch of the giant tree less than 10 kilometers away from Mo Jianli's cave abode. The spiritual chi here was nowhere near as abundant as that in Mo Jianli's cave abode, but it was still far better than anywhere else in Cottonwood City, so Han Li was quite pleased with it and moved in with Taoist Zai and Zhu Gyur. The next half a month was quite uneventful, and Han Li stayed in the secret chamber of his pavilion, cultivating the spiritual sense secret technique that had been given to him by Patriarch Alzio. However, this was the first time that Zhu Gyur had been to a city in the spirit realm, and she would go out almost every day to explore the city. She had somehow managed to convince Taoist Zai to accompany her on her long trips around the city, so Han Li wasn't concerned about her safety at all. However, from what Zhu Gyur had been telling him after she returned from her daily outings, Han Li could clearly sense that the army within Cottonwood City was in a very tense state. It seemed that the higher-ups of all the races had made a decision to battle the devilish army, after all. In that case, it was clear that these uneventful days wouldn't last much longer. Sure enough, Mo Jianli arrived at his pavilion only several days later. After detecting the arrival of Mo Jianli with his spiritual sense, he immediately welcomed Mo Jianli into the hall. They each took a seat, and after exchanging some pleasantries, Mo Jianli revealed the purpose for his visit. We've decided on the main strategies we'll be adopting in the battle against the devilish army. The most powerful beings among our united army are myself, Brother Ao, and Xianxia of the Xianxia race, so we should be able to handle the sacred ancestors in the devilish army. However, due to the heavy defeats the Wood tribe has suffered, they don't have any grand ascension stage beings left, so we'll have to reinforce them in that area. With your powers, you'll undoubtedly be assigned an important duty, fellow Taoist Han. This battle is just as important for our human race, so I'm naturally more than willing to offer my services. Feel free to issue me any instructions that you have, and I'll do my best to complete them, Han Li replied with a smile. Your powers rank below only us 3 grand ascension stage beings, so you'll be playing an extremely important role in this battle. Has fellow Taoist Zai recovered his powers yet? Mo Jianli asked. I'm afraid not, Senior. Brother Zai won't be able to make a full recovery without at least half a year of rest and recuperation, Han Li replied. That's quite a pity. If fellow Taoist Zai can recover to his full power, then our chances of winning this battle will improve by at least 10%, Mo Jianli sighed in a forlorn manner. Brother Zai's powers are indeed not inferior to those of the average Grand Ascension stage being, but it's not easy to employ his services. If I didn't have some special assets up my sleeve, I wouldn't have been able to convince him to come back with me, Han Li said. I've heard about the rules stipulated by fellow Taoist Zai, but regardless of the price, it's definitely a good deal to be able to bring him to our spirit realm. Even if he doesn't do anything, the presence of a Grand Ascension stage faux immortal puppet on the battlefield will be very intimidating to the enemy, Mo Jianli replied. I certainly hope so, Han Li could only reply with a wry smile. Seeing as fellow Taoist Zai hasn't fully recovered, we won't be sending you to the front lines. Here, that's what we'll do. There are 3 cores in the Wood Realm 36 Extremes formation. If any of them is destroyed, the formation would become significantly less powerful, and if all 3 were to be destroyed, then the entire formation would collapse altogether, so these cores are extremely important. Having said that, due to their importance, the 3 cores are all very heavily guarded, so they'll be very safe places to stay. Brother Ao and I have decided to assign you to one of those cores. What do you think, fellow Daoist Han? Mojangly proposed. I have no issues with that. I'll be sure to ensure the safety of the core, Han Li replied without any hesitation. However, Mojangly shook his head and said, if the cores were to be destroyed, the outcome of the battle could be affected, but in comparison, your safety is far more important to our human race. If you really do encounter some insurmountable enemies, then retreat and prioritize your own safety above all else. Otherwise, if something were to happen to you, even a victory wouldn't be worth it. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this before immediately nodding in response. Thank you for holding me in such high regard, Senior. I understand what I have to do now. Just remember that your top priority is to keep yourself safe, and only after that comes the safety of the formation. With Brother Zai by your side, I'm sure you won't encounter any issues unless you encounter the true body of a sacred ancestor. I've heard from Brother Ao that you and Brother Zai have even managed to fight on equal footing with that sacred ancestor Yuan Cha, Mojangly said with a smile. Senior Ao Zio is far too kind. Brother Zai and I were only just barely able to ensure self-preservation, and it was Senior Ao Zio who drove Yuan Cha away in the end, Han Li replied in a modest manner. In any case, you and fellow Taoist Zai are able to dominate virtually all beings below the Grand Ascension stage. The Wood Tribe and the Xianxia race will also be sending some body integration stage beings to protect the formation core with you. Fellow Taoist Ao and I are of the opinion that you and fellow Taoist Zai will be more than enough, but those two races are unaware of your powers, so they insisted on sending some more people, Mojangly said. Han Li wasn't surprised to hear this, and he asked, I see, but who will be the leader of the group? For cultivators like us, whoever is most powerful will naturally be the one to call the shots. I don't know who the Wood Tribe and Xianxia race will be sending, but I'm sure they won't be more powerful than you. Having said that, the high-grade beings of the Wood Tribe will definitely be quite familiar with the formation, so it would be wise to inquire them if any issues arise, Mojangly replied. I understand. When will I be required to set off? Han Li asked. With the Wood Tribe's 36 backup holy trees, it'll be a lot easier to set up the formation, but it'll still take some time. Most importantly, we have to lure the entire devilish army into the formation first. Hence, fellow Taoist Ao and I will be setting off with the united army to lure out the devilish army, while you'll be setting off with the second group to set up the formation. Once the formation is complete, you'll stay in the formation core in preparation for the upcoming battle, Mojangly replied. Han Li saw no issues with this, so he nodded and gave an affirmative response. After that, Mojangly didn't remain in Han Li's pavilion for much longer and quickly departed. Half a month later, all types of energy fluctuations suddenly erupted within the entirety of Cottonwood City, and streaks of dazzling light erupted into the air from all levels of the city, accompanied by resounding booms. The streaks of light contained war carriages and giant arcs, and there were countless warriors from all of the races of the United Army gathered on those flying treasures. These warriors were all standing ramrod straight on the flying treasures, giving off an astonishing baleful aura. More and more of these flying treasures began to fly out of the city, and soon, the entire sky had been concealed behind a mass of tens of thousands of carriages and arcs. Right at this moment, the string of resounding booms suddenly ceased, and the entire city tremored slightly before over 100 gargantuan island-like objects emerged. These objects were all of different shapes and forms, presenting a very chaotic sight to behold. Chapter 2159, The Second Formation Core. The gigantic objects included massive palaces, mountainous beehive-shaped islands, and massive clouds of green light. All of them were also filled with troops of the United Army, and they stopped momentarily in midair before flying away from Cottonwood City, surrounded by throngs of flying carriages and arcs. Close to half of the United Army's elite forces had departed, including the 3 Grand Ascension stage beings. They were going to unite with the troops deployed by other cities to form a formidable force that could truly contend with the devilish army. Han Li didn't depart with this group. Instead, he merely looked on as Mojangly and the others departed, then returned calmly to his pavilion to continue cultivating. 5 days later, Cottonwood City erupted into a frenzy again, as another branch of the United Army that was comprised primarily of Wood Tribe beings gathered together in preparation to leave the city as well. Han Li was currently meditating on the top floor of his pavilion at this point, and his expression changed slightly as he opened his eyes. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D65A, letter 1D498, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4FF. letter 1d658, letter 1d4f8, letter 1d662. Not long after that, the sound of footsteps rang out from the stairwell, and Zhugyuor arrived with a respectful look on her face. Senior Han, the Wood Tribe has extended an invitation toward you. I see, you're still too weak, so stay in Cottonwood City for now. Once the battle is over, I'll take you back to our human race, Han Li said. There was an implacable tone in Han Li's voice, and Zhugyuor immediately lowered her head before giving an affirmative response. Yes, Senior. Thus, Han Li rose to his feet in an unhurried manner before walking down the stairs. Upon arriving in the hall on the first floor, he discovered that Taoist Zai was seated in a corner in a completely expressionless manner, while a green-skinned young man from the Wood Tribe was standing at the center of the hall with an uneasy expression. Han Li immediately detected that this young man was only at the nascent soul stage, and had only recently manifested a nascent soul. As soon as Han Li arrived, the young man hurriedly rushed over to him before extending a deep bow. I pay my respects to Senior Han. I was sent here by our Grand Elder to invite you to join us. Your Grand Elder, isn't he resting in the holy tree? Han Li asked. Elder Han has temporarily taken over the role of Grand Elder, the young man explained. I see, lead the way then. Let's go, Brother Zai, Han Li replied before turning toward Taoist Zai. Taoist Zai offered no response, but he suddenly appeared completely silently behind Han Li in a blur. The Wood Tribe young man was naturally quite startled by this, but he didn't dare to ask any questions and hurriedly exited the room. Thus, Han Li and Taoist Zai were led out of the pavilion, where they caught sight of a dozen or so giant azure clouds hovering in midair. Each of these clouds was over 1,000 acres in size, and there were some pavilions and buildings that could be seen on them. Furthermore, there were many warriors from all races rushing atop the clouds, seemingly transporting some things from Cottonwood City onto the clouds. Han Li merely took a brief glance at the situation unfolding before his eyes, before following the young man toward the largest of the azure clouds. Moments later, Han Li appeared on a platform that was constructed from yellow wood atop the massive cloud. At one end of the platform was a green hall that was over 1,000 feet tall, and at the entrance of the hall were around a dozen fully armed Wood Tribe guards. Senior Han, our stand-in Grand Elder is currently waiting for you inside the hall, the young man carefully explained. Han Li took a glance at the hall before sweeping his spiritual sense into it, upon which he immediately sensed a few powerful auras. He motioned for the young man to continue leading the way, and the guards in front of the hall granted them passage, clearly indicating that they were all familiar with the young man. However, they sensed the unfathomable spiritual pressure emanating from Han Li's body as he passed by them, and a hint of fear crept into their wooden expressions. Some of them even unconsciously bowed and lowered their heads as Han Li was walking past them. Even though they were from different races, a respect for power was something that was universal across the entire spirit realm. Right at this moment, Han Li suddenly said something to Taoist Zai through voice transmission, and Taoist Zai immediately stopped in his tracks before making his way toward one side of the hall's entrance. The Wood Tribe guards were all quite surprised to see this, but they didn't dare to ask any questions. Meanwhile, Han Li followed the young man through a corridor and entered the hall before casually inspecting his surroundings, upon which he discovered that there were only 3 people in the hall, which was several hundred feet in size. The one sitting on the main seat was a purple-haired elderly man from the Wood Tribe. This was a thin, late-body integration cultivator who was wearing a set of green robes and a golden and silver belt around his waist. On either side of the elderly man were seated a silver-armored burly man from the Wood Tribe and a tall and lithe young woman in black, both of whom were at the mid-body integration stage. The burly man was very imposing and significantly taller than the average Wood Tribe being. There were several deep wrinkles on his forehead, and his eyes were completely wooden and soulless. As for the young woman, she appeared to be around 18 years of age with a pair of short black horns on her head. She was quite beautiful, but she currently wore a cold expression. All 3 of them immediately fell silent and turned toward Han Li upon his arrival. Upon verifying that Han Li was indeed at the late-body integration stage, a wide smile appeared on the elderly man's face, and he stood up before cupping his fist in a salute. Brother Han, I've heard much about you from Senior Mo. Our Wood Tribe is immensely fortunate to have you on our side. Greetings, fellow Taoist Han. My name is Cao Jai. So you're Han Li. As expected, you seem to be far more powerful than fellow Taoist Cao and myself. I am Fei Xianxia of the Xianxia race. Upon detecting Han Li's cultivation base, the other two beings in the room also stood up before extending salutes. "Sorry to keep you waiting, fellow Taoists," Han Li replied as he returned a salute of his own. "Please take a seat, Brother Han. We are currently discussing the protection of the formation core. Fellow Taoist Cao and Fairy Fei will team up with you to protect the same formation core," the elderly man said with a smile. As for the young man, he had already backed out of the hall in a respectful manner. "With fellow Taoist Cao and Fairy Fei's assistance, I'll be better equipped to protect the formation core," Han Li replied, clearly already treating Cao Jai and Fei Zioxi as his subordinates. His cultivation base was superior to theirs, so there was no need for him to be overly polite. Otherwise, it could lead them into thinking that they could challenge his authority. Cao Jai displayed no reaction to this, but Fei Zioxi's expression changed slightly, and she couldn't help but give a cold harumph. "Haha, with your powers, I'm sure the formation core will be safe. However, aside from protecting the formation core from devilish attacks, the three of you will have another important task to complete," the elderly man said. "Another important task? Why did I not hear about this from our Grand Elder? Did you add this task on a whim?" Fei Zioxi asked as her brows furrowed slightly with displeasure. "Of course not. The important task I'm referring to is something that fellow Taoist Cao will have to complete. You and fellow Taoist Han will still only be responsible for protecting the formation core," the elderly man explained. "Oh, would you be able to elaborate on what exactly this task is?" Han Li asked in an intrigued voice. "Due to the intricacies of the formation, our united army will most likely have to borrow some power from the three formation cores. When that time comes, the people situated at the three cores will have to cooperate with the united army. I've already informed Cao Jai of how to do this, but he'll require your protection while he's activating the power of the formation core," the elderly man said. "I see, that's not an issue. The formation was set up by your race in the first place, so it's only right for fellow Taoist Cao to operate it," Han Li replied with a nonchalant smile. "I also have no objections to this," Fei Zioxi chimed in with a nod. "Great. I knew you two would be willing to lend Cao Jai your assistance. Once the formation is set up, the second formation core will be left to the three of you," the elderly man said as he rose to his feet before extending a salute toward Han Li's trio. Han Li's trio naturally also stood up and returned the salute. "Rest assured, Elder Han, we'll be sure to do our best." After that, Elder Han informed them of some other matters that required their attention, then gave each of them a jade slip, within which were contained some of the different forms that the formation could take on. If enemies were to make it to their formation core, they would be able to use the power of the restriction to oppose them. Elder Han then summoned 3 wood tribe beings to organize a place to stay for Han Li's trio in the buildings on the giant cloud. After all, there was still quite a long journey ahead, and prior to arriving at their destination, Han Li and the others naturally had to prime themselves into the best condition possible. Half a day later, a burst of rumbling rang out in the air once again, and the dozen or so giant clouds also departed from Cottonwood City, accompanied by thousands of flying carriages and battle arcs, heading directly toward the territory that had been taken over by the devilish army. Chapter 2160, Completion of the Formation. Over half a month later, Han Li was standing expressionlessly atop a pagoda on the giant azure cloud, looking down toward a lush mountain range. Fei Zioxi and Cao Jai stood slightly behind him on either side, and they were also casting their eyes downward. Aside from over 100 flying carriages and battle arcs patrolling the nearby area, all of the other giant clouds were nowhere to be seen. The mountain range wasn't a very large one and only had a radius of less than 100 kilometers, but there were countless humanoid figures traversing through it as one tall platform after another rose up from the ground. These stone platforms were all of different heights with silver spirit patterns engraved upon them, and there were green flags that were shimmering with faint spiritual light situated all over them. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that all of these platforms had risen up over the few spirit veins in the mountain range. At the center of the mountains was a valley, within which a gigantic tree was growing rapidly at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. With each passing moment, it would grow by around a foot, and it was already virtually as tall as the mountains around it. On the ground around the giant tree was a green formation that was around 100 acres in area, and there were over 100 wood tribe beings seated within the formation. All of them were at or above the nascent soul stage, and they all had their eyes closed while making different hand seals. All of the stone platforms were connected around the valley, causing all of the world's origin chi in the entire mountain range to converge toward the valley in a frenzy, forming a series of extremely exuberant five-colored rainbows in the nearby air. There were several small mountain ranges close to 100,000 kilometers away, where a series of massive trees were also rapidly growing in obscure locations, and there were countless tall platforms being erected near them as well. If one were to look down from a high altitude, they discover that there were 36 of these formations that had been set up within an area with a radius of around 500,000 kilometers. Even though they weren't all complete yet, they had been arranged in an extremely profound configuration to form a super formation that presented a spectacular, breathtaking sight. At this point, all of the world's origin chi within the super formation had already been activated, and all types of energy fluctuations were beginning to appear in the air, filling the entire area with a sense of menace and peril. Standing atop the azure cloud, Han Li suddenly said, "At this rate, the formation core will be complete in a few days. Once it's completed, we'll descend this azure light island into the formation core and activate all of the protective restrictions to adopt a fully defensive stance." Fei Zioxi cast a glance toward Han Li before replying in a slightly cold voice, "I have no objections to that. However, it's rather surprising that the formation is taking so long to set up. I've heard that the progress at the other two formation cores is even slower than in our one. That's not going to be an issue, is it?" According to the information I received yesterday, the battle between the United Army and Devilish Army has just commenced, and they're trying to lure the Devilish Army into our formation. At the very least, it would take the Devilish Army over 10 days to get here, and by then, the formation will definitely already be complete. What I'm worried about is whether the formation will actually be powerful enough to deal the Devilish Army a heavy blow, Han Li replied. Letter 1D487, letter 1D493, letter 1D65A, letter 1D486, letter 1D500, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D664, letter 1D662. Rest assured, fellow Taoists, even without using the backup holy trees, the Wood Realm 36 Extremes formation possesses unfathomable power. Now that the 36 holy trees are being used, even a Grand Ascension stage being would struggle to escape from the formation on their own. As for the ordinary devilish beings, they stand no chance in the face of the formation's power, Cao Jai reassured with a confident smile. I'm sure the 36 backup holy trees will significantly bolster the formation's power, but at the same time, the devilish army is nothing to be scoffed at. In particular, all of the sacred ancestors possess immense power and many clones, all of which will be very difficult to deal with, Han Li said. The sacred ancestors are indeed powerful, but the grand elders will be responsible for facing them, so what's there for us to worry about? Fei Zioxi countered. He, Senior sang, and the others would perhaps be able to hold off the true bodies of the sacred ancestors, but they most likely won't be able to deal with the clones. Those clones will most likely be deployed by the devilish army to break the formation cores, Han Li replied with a smile. Sacred ancestor clones. Both Cao Jai and Fei Zioxi's expressions changed slightly upon hearing this. Have the two of you crossed paths with sacred ancestor clones in the past? Han Li asked as a meaningful look appeared in his eyes. A hint of hatred appeared on Cao Jai's face as he replied, I had once encountered a sacred ancestor clone with a fellow Taoist of roughly the same cultivation base as myself, and that fellow Taoist perished during the battle, while I managed to escape with severe injuries. I haven't encountered a sacred ancestor clone in person, but many of my loved ones have perished by their hands. If they're sent to our formation core, I'll be sure to give them a taste of their own medicine, Fei Zioxi also said with a cold expression. Fairy Fei, if you were to encounter a sacred ancestor clone on your own, then I'd advise you to turn and run. Otherwise, you'll only be sacrificing yourself for nothing, Cao Jai advised with a wry smile. However, Fei Zioxi merely gave a dismissive harumph, clearly not intending to heed Cao Jai's advice. There's no need to be alarmed, fellow Taoist Cao. If this formation really is as powerful as you say, then we should be able to contend with those sacred ancestor clones by drawing upon the formation's power. Of course, if too many of them come here at once, then we'll have to think of some other way, Han Li said in a calm voice. Think of some other way. Have you prepared some type of trump card, fellow Taoist Han? Cao Jai asked as his eyes lit up, and Fei Zioxi was also rather taken aback to hear this. I have indeed made some preparations, but I can't guarantee that they'll be effective, Han Li replied in a nonchalant manner. I see. It's quite a relief that you've made some preparations in advance, Brother Han, Cao Jai said as his expression eased slightly. It sounds like you're quite familiar with sacred ancestor clones, fellow Taoist Han. Have you faced some in the past as well? Fei Zioxi suddenly asked. I have indeed faced such clones on several occasions, Han Li replied in a calm manner. How did you fare against them? I've heard that they're far more powerful than the average late-body integration stage being, Fei Zioxi asked. I've killed a few, but I was also once forced to flee for over a year straight by few of them, Han Li replied with a nonchalant voice, but both Cao Jai and Fei Zioxi were astonished to hear this. You've killed sacred ancestor clones before. Oh, I see, you must have killed those clones with the assistance of your human race's army, right? Cao Jai quickly arrived at a conclusion that he thought to be reasonable, and Fei Zioxi was also enlightened upon hearing this. Indeed, with Han Li's late-body integration stage powers, it wouldn't be impossible for him to kill a sacred ancestor clone with the assistance of an army. Instead of replying to Cao Jai's question, Han Li chuckled with a confident smile. Hee, that's all in the past now. If multiple sacred ancestor clones arrive at our formation core, then all you have to do is hold off one of the clones each and leave the rest to me. In that case, I'll be counting on you, Brother Han. Cao Jai was still feeling rather bewildered, but a respectful tone had unconsciously crept into his voice, and he was clearly conceding the leadership role to Han Li. After all, it was an extremely remarkable feat that Han Li had slain sacred ancestor clones in the past, even if it had been with the assistance of the human army. Fei Zioxi hesitated for a short while before finally replying with a slight bow. If you have a way to deal with the other sacred ancestor clones, then I'm also willing to follow your instructions. All right, I'll be sure to repay your trust, fellow Taoists, Han Li said with a smile. Thus, Han Li officially assumed the leadership role at the second formation core. During the next few days, Han Li's trio took turns overseeing the completion of the formation core. 5 days later, the second formation core was finally completed, and all of the Wood Tribe guards and formation masters flocked onto the giant azure cloud. Under Han Li's control, the azure cloud descended from above before landing right beside the valley where the giant tree was situated. At the same time, all of the world's origin chi around the massive tree was stirred up as countless green specks of light surged out of thin air in a frenzy, then vanished into the entire mountain range. A string of rumbling booms rang out as all of the formation flags on the tall platforms tremored violently, following which a series of light barriers appeared in the air. Immediately thereafter, bursts of green chi surged out of all parts of the mountain range, instantly inundating the mountain range in its entirety. All of the protective restrictions at the second formation core had been activated at this point, and there would be no chance of escape even for the average body integration stage being if they were to enter the formation core. Half a month later, the entire Wood Realm 36 Extremes formation was finally complete, setting up a deadly trap of massive proportions for the devilish army. Chapter 2161, The 8 Wood Spirit Disciples. From the day that the formation core was completed, Han Li's trio had begun meditating at the foot of the giant tree, instead of residing on the massive cloud to guard against sneak attacks by high-grade devilish beings. The backup holy tree was the foundation of this formation core, so the core would remain intact as long as the tree still stood. As for the thousands of warriors accompanying Han Li's trio, they had been distributed onto the nearby mountains surrounding the formation core. Taoist Zai had been instructed to reside within a certain building on the massive cloud, and with his incredible powers, it was naturally a simple task for him to replicate the aura of a mid-grade human cultivator. Aside from Grand Ascension stage beings, it would be virtually impossible for other cultivators to glean his true cultivation base, so even though Cao Jai and Fei Zioxi had seen Taoist Zai on several occasions, they paid no heed to him and simply regarded him as a member of Han Li's entourage. Ever since the completion of the formation, news surrounding the battle between the united and devilish armies had been constantly pouring in, and Han Li's trio was carefully monitoring the situation. According to the news they received, the battle between the united and devilish armies had been extremely fierce, and only after both sides had expended close to 20% of their troops did the united army begin to retreat. On this occasion, 3 sacred ancestors had appeared in the devilish army alongside over 20 sacred ancestor clones and hundreds of devilish lords, thereby giving them a clear advantage when it came to high-end power. Through the fierce battle that had taken place thus far, the united army had managed to fool the devilish army, and the latter immediately set off in pursuit as the united army began to retreat. Meanwhile, the united army was retreating as it battled, engaging in battles of different scales against the devilish army every day, while gradually shifting the battlefield toward the formation in a discreet manner. Time slowly passed, and the frequency of news arriving from the battlefield was steadily increasing as the two armies drew closer and closer to the formation. Atop a giant mountain within the formation stood Elder Han of the Wood Tribe on a massive platform that had only recently been erected. Not far ahead of him was a formation that was only around 40 feet in size, around which sat 8 Wood Tribe elderly men, all of whom had their eyes closed and were holding a white wooden disc in one hand, while constantly making hand seals with the other hand. Beams of white light would occasionally be released by the wooden discs before converging above the formation to form a large light screen. At present, Elder Han was staring intently at the scene unfolding on the light screen. There were countless specks of light spread all over the screen, all of which were either purple or green in color. The specks of light would occasionally intertwine before quickly separating like a pair of armies constantly clashing with and retreating away from one another. However, all of the specks of light were gradually moving toward a certain direction, and when they finally entered a giant diagram, all of the specks of light suddenly vanished at the same time. At this moment, the 8 elderly men opened their eyes, and the wooden discs in their hands dimmed while the light screen disintegrated into nothingness. "Everything is progressing smoothly. Thank you for your hard work, masters," Elder Han said with an extremely polite smile. "There's no need to thank us. The survival of our Wood Tribe hinges on this battle, so it's only to be expected for us to give everything that we have. However, I must remind you that this simulation was based on the current circumstances. If anything were to change, then the result could immediately be altered," one of the elderly men replied. "I'm well aware of that. The next few days will be of vital importance, so I'll have to trouble you to simulate the movement of the armies every day to prevent the direction of the battle from straying out of the realm of our control," Elder Han replied as he cupped his fist in a serious salute. "All 8 of us have some aptitude when it comes to divination, but there are countless powerful beings involved in this battle, so there are far too many volatile factors. As such, we can only do our best, and the results of our simulation should only be referenced rather than fully trusted," the elderly man said with a shake of his head. "I'm aware of that as well, but doing something will surely be better than doing nothing," Elder Han replied with a wry smile. Even though there was no way to glean the outcome of a battle of such a massive scale through divination, it was very plausible for one to simulate the progression of the battle through divination to make some accurate judgments. These 8 elderly men were the most renowned divination masters of the Wood Tribe, and they had made countless important contributions to the Wood Tribe. They were granted the title of the 8 Wood Spirit Disciples by the panel of elders, and due to the overexertion of their life force through many years of divination, they had become extremely wizened in appearance. It was exactly due to this that the Wood Tribe had refrained from employing the services of the 8 Wood Spirit Disciples prior to this. But as a result, their Grand Elder fell into a trap sprung by the devilish army, and not only was he severely wounded, most of the Wood Tribe's territory was lost to the devilish army. Thus, in this vital battle, the elders of the Wood Tribe had no choice but to enlist the services of the 8 Wood Spirit Disciples in case any further mishaps occurred. Following the departure of the 8 Wood Spirit Disciples, several Wood Tribe elders immediately approached Elder Han from nearby, and they began to discuss some important matters. Meanwhile, high up in the air above the border of the Wood Tribe's remaining territory, and the territory claimed by the devilish army, Mojangly was hovering as a faint silver shadow within a dark cloud that was around an acre in size. Countless arcs of silver lightning were flashing in and out of the cloud before hurtling into the distance, where a giant inky black sword that was over 1,000 feet in length was plunged firmly into a mountain close to 10 kilometers away. Standing atop the hilt of the sword was a thin, devilish man in a dark green cloak, and he was releasing streaks of glacial sword chi with both hands. Each streak of sword chi was several hundred feet in length, and they eradicated all of the oncoming bolts of silver lightning. In the air above a massive lake, 2 mountainous wolf projections were locked in a ferocious battle. One of them was silver in color and around 4,000 feet in length with streaks of white light flying out of its mouth, while the other was completely inky black and had balls of baleful chi erupting out of its mouth in retaliation. The pair of giant wolves were able to slice massive gashes into the air with swipes of their claws, and conjure up bursts of powerful shockwaves and fierce winds to attack one another. The battle taking place between the two giant wolf projections was extremely brutal, but regardless of what injuries they sustained, they were able to instantly regenerate. Their battle had razed everything within a radius of around 100 kilometers to the ground, and within the belly of a nearby small mountain, Patriarch Alzio sat within a temporary formation with his eyes tightly shut. His entire body was giving off a faint silver light, and he was making a hand seal with both hands. Thousands of kilometers away, Xianxia was seated in a temporary secret chamber over 10,000 feet below a swamp. The entire secret chamber was enshrouded in complete darkness, with the exception of the purple devilish patterns on her body, which were flashing with a faint light. Within a mysterious space, two gigantic beings were facing one another from several kilometers away. One of them had crimson skin with a pair of black curved horns on its head and a pair of fleshy wings on its back. Its pupils were of a light golden color, and it had its arms crossed with a cold look on its face. It was appraising another giant with inky black skin that was riddled with golden and silver devilish patterns. This giant's upper body was completely bare, and the only item of clothing it wore was a beast-thighed loincloth. The two giants were glowering at one another with their massive eyes, and astonishing auras were emanating from their bodies. In the air between them, a pair of crimson monsters that resembled both wolves and apes were battling a massive three-headed golden tiger. Letter 1D487, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4E, letter 1D66C, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D4AT. The three creatures were also locked in an extremely fierce battle, and they appeared to be evenly matched. Just as the united army had planned, the three sacred ancestors within the devilish army were being kept at bay by the three grand ascension stage beings of the united army. As such, all of them were occupied and unable to assist their respective armies. Meanwhile, tens of millions of devilish beings were being slowly led toward the formation by the united army. If the devilish army were to enter the super formation without any sacred ancestors to lead it, it would undoubtedly be severely ravaged, and it seemed that everything was progressing in the united army's favor. However, there were currently over 1,000 devilish flying carriages traveling rapidly around the united army along the outskirts of the battlefield. These flying carriages were all triangular in shape and completely gray with peculiar devilish patterns engraved onto their surfaces. There were close to 10,000 devilish beings on these carriages, and every single inch of their bodies were covered in masks and robes, revealing only pairs of cold crimson eyes. What was even more unsettling was that despite the large number of devilish beings on the carriages, the entire group was traveling in a completely silent, wraith-like manner. Chapter 2162, Battle of the Wood Tribe 1. At the center of this group was a black devilish ark that was several times larger than the flying carriages around it. Most of the ark was concealed within devilish chi, but there were some devilish beings that were visible on the ark, and their auras suggested that they were far more powerful than the devilish beings on the flying carriages. All of a sudden, an elderly voice rang out from the giant ark. "How long until we reach Cottonwood City? The United Army's three Grand Ascension stage beings are all absent, and I had to expend a massive price to return to the spirit realm without being detected by the Wood Tribe, so failure is not an option here. At our current speed, we'll get to Cottonwood City in around half a month, Master Tun Tian," an extremely respectful male voice replied. "That's too slow. Yuan Cha and the others may not be able to buy me that much time. Speed up and make sure we get to Cottonwood City within 10 days. The holy tree is far more important to the Wood Tribe than you can imagine, and if we destroy it, the Wood Tribe won't be able to protect their remaining territory any longer," the elderly voice commanded. "But Master Tun Tian, this is already the fastest speed that the crescent moon flying carriages can travel at while remaining hidden. If we go any faster, we might not be able to avoid detection from the Wood Tribe," the male voice replied hesitantly. "That's all right. The United Army is already being forced into retreat, so it's gathering all of its forces. As long as we exercise some caution, there won't be any issues. Besides, even if we encounter any Wood Tribe spies, I'll make sure they don't manage to escape alive," the elderly voice chuckled coldly. "In that case, I'll relay your orders to everyone right away, Master Tun Tian," the male voice replied in an elated manner. Shortly thereafter, the devilish arc and all of the flying carriages tremored slightly before accelerating drastically. But at the same time, they began to emit a faint buzzing sound that made them a lot less stealthy and inconspicuous. 7 days later, Han Li was meditating at the foot of the giant tree when his expression suddenly changed slightly, and he immediately opened his eyes, as did Cao Jai and Fei Ziox, who were seated on either side of him. The three of them then looked up in unison, and after the span of just a few breaths, something came hurtling toward them from afar. Azure light flashed, and a streak of sword chi that was several feet in length arrived. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he swept a hand toward the distance, and the streak of sword chi circled around in the air above the valley before descending toward the massive tree. Han Li made a grabbing motion, and a small azure sword projection appeared in his hand, within which was contained a white jade slip. He rubbed his hands together, and the azure light instantly faded, leaving only the small jade slip behind. Han Li picked up the jade slip before adhering it to his own forehead, then injected his spiritual sense into it. Cao Jai and Fei Zioxi both turned toward him with serious expressions, and a short while later, Han Li removed the jade slip from his own forehead before tossing it toward Cao Jai. The devilish army will be entering the formation in 2 hours, and the formation's power will be fully activated in half a day, with the aim of killing at least 2/3 of the devilish army. After inspecting the contents of the jade slip, Cao Jai was quite elated, and he tossed the jade slip to Fei Zioxi as he said, "So the devilish army really did fall for it. If we really can deal them such a heavy blow, then even if we can't recover the lost territory, we'll at least be able to ensure that the devilish army won't be able to launch any further attacks in the near future. In that case, we'll just have to activate the power of the formation at the agreed time. Once all 36 points are activated, the fate of those devilish beings will be sealed," Fei Zioxi also said with a smile after injecting her spiritual sense into the jade slip. "Prior to the complete activation of the formation, we can't let anyone leave this place, so tell everyone to be on high alert," Han Li instructed. "Yes, I'll relay that order right away and arrange some people to implement it," Cao Jai agreed. Most of the troops in the formation corps were Wood tribe beings, so it was naturally only fit for him to issue the order. "I'll go examine the restriction to see if there are any areas that require addressing," Fei Zioxi volunteered. "All right, thank you for your efforts, fellow Taoists. I'll be staying here. Make sure to inform me if you discover anything abnormal," Han Li replied with a nod. Thus, Cao Jai and Fei Zioxi rose to their feet before flying away. As for Han Li, he closed his eyes with a calm expression once again, seemingly completely unperturbed by the approaching devilish army. Half a day later, a string of rumbling booms suddenly rang out as countless massive trees emerged within the area encompassed by the Wood Realm 36 Extremes formation. Each of these trees was as thick as a water tank, and they grew to over 1,000 feet tall in the blink of an eye, creating a boundless forest. All of the devilish beings traveling through the air were instantly forced to plummet down onto the ground as soon as they entered the formation, regardless of whether they were using flying treasures or movement techniques. Only those who were at or above the spatial tempering stage could just barely remain hovering in midair, but the magic power this expended was several times that of what it normally was. Devilish beings were generally very tough and hardy, so most of them survived the fall, but this still sent the devilish army into a panicked frenzy. In contrast with the devilish army, the United Army knew what to expect, and they were able to make composed descents as soon as the flight restriction appeared. Within the forest, countless specks of green light flashed, and the United Army instantly vanished. Even the body integration stage devilish lords were unable to sense even a single enemy in the forest with their enormous spiritual sense. However, it was only in the next instant that the fearsome power of the formation began to make itself known. First came a burst of indescribable energy fluctuation that suddenly began to spread from the center of the formation. The fluctuations quickly swept through all parts of the forest. An extremely pure wood attribute spiritual chi emerged before gushing into some particularly massive trees in a frenzy. A loud rumbling boom rang out, and those massive trees were suddenly uprooted before transforming into wooden giants that were around 1,000 feet tall, all of which charged toward the devilish beings caught within the formation. After absorbing some wood attribute spiritual chi, the other trees in the forest also grew at a rapid rate, and they either swept their branches toward the devilish beings or fell upon them as massive logs. The devilish army was caught completely off guard, and they quickly suffered countless casualties. However, there were also quite a large number of high-grade devilish beings who had entered the formation, and they immediately began to issue orders, urging everyone to adopt defensive formations to protect themselves. Unfortunately for them, the formation's power far exceeded what was being displayed here. Almost as soon as the devilish army eradicated the wooden giants and nearby trees, gusts of fierce white winds suddenly swept through the air up above before forming a series of massive wind dragons that pounced toward the devilish beings down below with ferocious might. Following the wind dragons, countless green leaves emerged out of thin air, then transformed into sharp blades that rained down in a torrential downpour. Over 10 waves of different attacks were unleashed in succession, and in the wake of the carnage, the only devilish beings that remained were either extremely powerful themselves or were being protected by powerful high-grade devilish beings. Even though the formation was extremely powerful, targeting so many devilish beings at once naturally expended an astonishing amount of energy. Even with a vast number of spirit stones, spirit veins, and the pure spiritual power provided by the 36 backup holy trees, the formation was unable to unleash any further attacks and could only just barely trap the enemy as it slowly recovered its energy. At the rate at which the formation was recovering, it would take at least half a day before it could unleash another wave of attacks. As for the devilish beings outside the formation, all they saw was a flash of green light, following which an extremely thick green light barrier appeared before them, and they instantly lost contact with their brethren on the other side of the barrier. These devilish beings naturally began to attack the light barrier in a fit of bewilderment, and they were confident that the barrier wouldn't be able to last for long in the face of their combined attacks. However, right at this moment, countless giant light formations suddenly emerged in front of the light barrier amid a flash of white light. Some of the high-grade devilish beings immediately identified these formations, and they hurriedly yelled, "Those are teleportation formations. Attack them." However, it was already too late. White light flashed from the light formations, and countless troops from the united army appeared before immediately charging toward the remnants of the devilish army. Chapter 2163, Battle of the Wood Tribe 2. Most of the devilish army was trapped in the formation, so the remnants were naturally severely outnumbered by the united army. Even though the devilish beings organized themselves in retaliation, they were overwhelmed in less than half a day and were forced to begin a retreat. The united army naturally wasn't willing to let them escape, and the tables were completely turned with the devilish army fleeing the scene, while the united army gave chase in hot pursuit. Almost at the exact same moment that the devilish army began to retreat, a ball of piercing white light suddenly appeared on the waist of Xianxia, who was engaged in a battle with Patriarch Audiobook. Immediately thereafter, a string of black runes surged forth before forming several lines of text before her eyes. Xianxia glanced at the message in a nonchalant manner, but her expression immediately changed drastically, for she rose up into the air as a streak of black light, then vanished through the ceiling of the secret chamber she was situated in. Moments later, the streak of black light emerged from the swamp, then rose up to an altitude of tens of thousands of feet before flying toward the Wood Tribe's territory. However, right at this moment, a male voice rang out from even higher above. "Where are you going, fellow Taoist Xianxia?" As soon as the voice trailed off, a thunderclap suddenly rang out up above, and a bolt of silver lightning that was over 1,000 feet in length came crashing down. "You dare to stop me?" Xianxia was in a hurry to leave, but in the face of such a powerful attack, she had no choice but to stop and raise a hand upward in retaliation. A streak of black sword chi that was also over 1,000 feet in length was unleashed, and both the bolt of lightning and streak of sword chi vanished following a resounding clash. "Our battle still hasn't been decided, so I naturally can't allow you to leave." Spatial fluctuations erupted up above, and a ball of lightning appeared in a soundless manner. Within the ball of lightning was none other than the smiling Patriarch Audiobook. "HMPH, looks like you already planned everything in advance to stall the three of us, but don't celebrate too early. We'll see if you have what it takes to stop me." Xianxia harumphed with an enraged expression before conjuring up around a dozen identical projections, all of which fled toward different directions at the same time. Patriarch Audiobook's expression darkened upon seeing this, and he let loose a loud cry before pointing a finger upward. "Restrict." All of a sudden, the air within a radius of 5 kilometers tremored as the world's origin chi surged, following which a massive white jade bowl came crashing down from above like a gigantic dome. 5-colored light flashed within the bowl alongside countless huge runes, and a burst of enormous force came surging out of it, causing even the air to congeal. The ground below the massive bowl also tremored violently before sinking down by several tens of feet, and the dozen or so yuan cha projections were caught completely off guard, reducing them to less than a tenth of their original speed. At the same time, Patriarch Alzio laid a hand onto the top of his own head, releasing around a dozen streaks of white light, each of which shot forth toward one of the yuan cha projections. The streaks of white light transformed into snowy white, two-headed giant wolves mid-flight, and pounced toward the projections without any hesitation. All of the yuan cha projections were naturally quite enraged by this, and they all summoned devilish treasures in retaliation. Thus, the battle between Patriarch Alzio and Sacred Ancestor Yuan Cha commenced once again, but it had become far more fierce than it had originally been. However, the two of them were quite evenly matched, so a decisive outcome clearly wouldn't be reached anytime soon. After receiving news of the dire situation that the devilish army was in, the other two sacred ancestors had also tried to escape, but they had been stopped by Mojangly, and the Grand Ascension stage being from the Yaksha race as well. Meanwhile, during the interval where the formation was unable to unleash any further attacks, the high-grade devilish beings and sacred ancestor clones in the formation had departed from the rest of the devilish army. They had to take this opportunity to break the formation. Otherwise, once it recovered its energy and began to unleash more waves of attacks, even more casualties would result. On top of that, the fewer devilish beings that remained, the better the formation would be able to focus its attacks, thereby making them more powerful. Once all of the other devilish beings were eradicated, even the high-grade devilish beings weren't confident in their ability to survive in the formation. As such, even though they knew that it would undoubtedly be extremely difficult to break the formation, they had no choice but to venture deep into the formation to find its cores. Among these high-grade devilish beings was a group of around a dozen spatial tempering stage devilish beings that were led by a cow-headed devilish lord. They were flying slowly over the forest while constantly appraising their surroundings in a careful manner. Even though the formation was no longer actively attacking them, it was still filled with all types of defensive restrictions, and activating those restrictions could easily spell their doom. On top of that, their spiritual sense was hampered by the formation, reducing their sensory range to less than 2,000 feet, so they naturally had to proceed with caution. After flying for close to 100 kilometers, no mishaps had taken place, and all of the devilish beings in the group had let down their guard slightly. Right as they were flying over a small hill, a streak of light suddenly appeared before the devilish scout who was leading the way from the front, and before he had a chance to do anything, the streak of light had already decapitated him. A black nascent soul that was enveloped within a ball of gray chi shot forth out of his headless body before retreating in a panic frenzy, only to be completely destroyed by the same streak of light amid a cry of anguish. The other devilish beings were extremely alarmed by this, and they all summoned defensive devilish treasures. Right at this moment, spatial fluctuations erupted through the nearby area, and over 100 identical streaks of light emerged out of thin air. The devilish lord focused his gaze on the streaks of light and identified them to be yellow wooden swords, each of which was around a foot in length, and they were giving off glacial chi that was quite alarming even to him. Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D4 5F, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 38, letter 2 2F, letter 1D6 24, letter 1D6 30, letter 1D6 2E. Be careful, these wooden swords possess power comparable to an all-out attack from a spatial tempering stage being. The devilish lord yelled as he injected his magic power into an umbrella-shaped protective treasure before him. The green devilish treasure immediately lit up, transforming into a green projection that enveloped his body. In the next instant, the streaks of glacial light converged from all directions, and the other devilish beings also injected their magic power into their respective treasures with all their might. Streaks of sword chi swept through the air, and a string of anguished cries rang out in quick succession. After the span of just a few breaths, all of the streaks of glacial light had vanished, and all of the high-grade devilish beings had disappeared aside from a single lonesome figure. The cow-headed devilish lord's face was currently very pale, and he suddenly threw up several mouthfuls of blood in succession. The umbrella projection around him had also become completely dull and devoid of luster. A wry smile appeared on the devilish lord's face as he produced a medicinal vial before tipping out a long-incised pill, then waved a hand through the air, upon which the green projection reverted back into a small green umbrella that landed in his hand. A few cracks had appeared on the surface of the devilish treasure. The devilish lord inspected his surroundings with a conflicted expression before finally heaving a faint sigh, then stowed his treasure away before flying slowly toward another direction. On another nearby mountain range, 3 devilish lords were flying toward the center of the mountain range while warding off countless oncoming blades of wind with their devilish treasures. All of a sudden, the world's origin chi up above tremored, and a golden light formation that was around an acre in size peered before sending several pillars of golden light crashing down from above. The 3 devilish lords were quite alarmed to see this, and they all sent their devilish treasures flying upward, where they converged to form a massive Techa diagram in the air above. Several resounding booms rang out as the pillars of light quickly destroyed the Techa diagram before inundating the 3 devilish lords. Shortly thereafter, the golden light vanished, and the 3 devilish lords were also nowhere to be seen. A burst of buzzing suddenly rang out from the massive tree that Han Li was seated under. Countless 5-colored runes surged out of the tree trunk amid a flash of green light. Han Li slowly opened his eyes and murmured to himself, "Some devilish beings have finally arrived, and they seem to be quite powerful." Chapter 2164, Battle of the Wood Tribe 3. Almost at the exact same moment, Cao Jai and Fei Zioxi also arrived on the scene as streaks of light. "Brother Han, it looks like the spirit tree is informing us that there are people approaching the mountain range. Do you think they're sacred ancestor clones?" Cao Jai hurriedly asked as soon as he arrived. There are quite a few sacred ancestor clones in the devilish army, but their numbers are completely insignificant considering the scale of this formation, so I think it's more likely that they'll be ordinary devilish lords, Fei Zioxi said as she arrived beside Han Li. "The formation core will be able to show us what we're dealing with here," Han Li said in a calm manner as he made a hand seal before releasing a streak of azure light toward the giant tree. The massive tree shuddered slightly, following which the formation down below was activated, releasing around a dozen pillars of light at once. These pillars of light then converged to form an azure ball of light before Han Li's trio, and Han Li immediately flicked a string of incantation seals of different colors into it. The ball of light revolved on the spot before transforming into an azure crystal ball with a surface that was as smooth as a mirror, but comprised of dozens of rhomboid faces. Each face was depicting an image of one area of the mountain range, and Han Li opened his mouth to expel a ball of pure spiritual chi into the crystal ball before gently pointing a finger at it. The facets of the crystal ball instantly blurred in unison, as if countless images were flashing rapidly through them, making them impossible to glean with the naked eye. However, Han Li and the others were all extremely powerful cultivators, so they were able to assess the images flashing over the different facets. After the span of only a few breaths, Han Li suddenly let loose a low cry before abruptly sweeping a sleeve toward the crystal ball, upon which it slowly ceased in its rotation. At the same time, all of the images on the crystal ball quickly vanished with the exception of a single image, which instantly took up the entire surface area of the crystal ball. The image depicted was of a certain area on the outskirts of the mountain range, where 3 devilish lords and 4 spatial tempering stage devilish beings were hovering in midair. They had clearly activated the restriction nearby, and were being forced to contend with countless bolts of ferocious lightning. One of them was a particularly tall and broad devilish being wielding a small copper mirror, from within which one pillar of black light after another was being unleashed, easily nullifying most of the oncoming bolts of lightning. The remaining bolts of lightning naturally posed no threat to the other devilish beings, who were able to keep them at bay with relative ease. There are 3 devilish lords, 2 of which are at the mid-body integration stage, while the other is at the late-body integration stage. The remaining 4 are only at the spatial tempering stage, but their auras are very peculiar, so it seems that they're no ordinary devilish beings, Fei Zioxi observed. Those 4 spatial tempering stage devilish beings are similar in appearance and are using the same devilish arts, so they're most likely from the same race and adept in using combination techniques. How do you think we should handle these devilish beings, fellow Taoists? Ordinary restrictions most likely won't be able to trap them, Han Li said with a calm smile. If we were situated elsewhere, we would be able to activate the most powerful restrictions in the formation to kill that group of devilish beings, but the formation core is currently accumulating energy for the entire formation, so the restrictions at our disposal are quite limited. As such, we'll have to take care of these devilish beings ourselves, Cao Jai said after a brief moment of contemplation. The three of us should be able to keep the three devilish lords at bay. We'll just leave the 4 spatial tempering stage devilish beings to the dozen or so spatial tempering stage beings under our command, Fei Zioxi said in an expressionless manner. Those 4 devilish beings are all at the pinnacle of the late spatial tempering stage, and their powers will undoubtedly be bolstered even further by their combination techniques. In contrast, our subordinates are all average spatial tempering stage beings, so they may not be a match for those 4 devils. Even so, they'll have the formation to assist them. They won't be able to use the most powerful restrictions, but the other restrictions are quite useful as well. Surely that'll be enough, Fei Zioxi countered in a confident manner. Cao Jai considered this for a moment before nodding in agreement. In that case, there shouldn't be any issues. What do you think, Brother Han? Even with the formation to assist them, our subordinates won't be able to stop those 4 spatial tempering stage devilish beings. If I'm not mistaken, those 4 devils should have been manifested by the same devilish being. If they were to combine as one, the resulting enemy will definitely be extremely powerful, so it'd be best for you to take them on yourself, Fairy Fei. Also, the formation core needs to be guarded at all times in case of sneak attacks, so fellow Taoist Cao Jai will stay behind. As for those 3 devilish lords, just leave them to me, Han Li said. What, are you serious, Brother Han? Fei Zio was very bewildered to hear this. Rest assured, I'll be more than capable of looking after myself. Brother Zai, show yourself, Han Li said with a smile. As soon as his voice trailed off, a white figure emerged silently beside Han Li amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, and the aura he was releasing was no less powerful than Han Li's. It was none other than Taoist Zai, a late body integration stage being. Isn't that? Cao Jai and Fei Zio were both stunned at the sight of Taoist Zai. I'm sure there aren't any further issues now, right, fellow Taoists? Han Li chuckled in a nonchalant manner. Cao Jai was the first to return to his senses, and he immediately cupped his fist in a salute as a wide smile appeared on his face. Of course, I didn't think that our seniors had arranged for such a powerful being to accompany us in secret. I have no objections either, Fei Zioxi said with a peculiar look on her face. It was clear that the 2 of them had arrived at the conclusion that Taoist Zai had been sent to accompany Han Li by the Grand Ascension Stage seniors of the United Army. As for Taoist Zai himself, he merely stood in complete silence beside Han Li. Han Li offered no explanation for Taoist Zai's behavior and shifted his gaze back to the crystal ball. At this point, the 7 devilish beings had already eradicated the nearby bolts of lightning and were slowly flying toward the center of the mountain range. Fellow Taoist Cao, activate the confounding 5 mountains restriction to separate these devilish beings. We'll proceed according to our original plan, Han Li instructed. Go on ahead, Brother Han. I'll activate the restriction right away. Cao Jai immediately agreed before flying over to the center of the formation in front of the giant tree. Immediately thereafter, he sat down with his eyes closed and made a hand seal while chanting an incantation. There were over 100 wood tribe beings seated around the formation, and they also began to make hand seals to assist him. Thus, Han Li's trio departed as 3 streaks of light toward the location where the devilish beings were situated. Almost at the exact same moment, around a dozen more streaks of light shot forth in hot pursuit behind the trio. These were none other than the dozen or so spatial tempering stage guards who had received Han Li's voice transmission earlier. The 7 devilish beings were slowly advancing through the mountain range, and they were being led by the burly devilish lord. Instead of stowing his copper mirror away, the devilish lord was holding it in front of his chest, occasionally directing it toward the landscape up ahead. It seemed that the mirror had the ability to identify restrictions. Everyone, look out! The burly devilish lord suddenly yelled in alarm as a ball of piercing silver light suddenly erupted on the surface of the mirror. The accompanying devilish beings' expressions changed drastically upon hearing this, and they quickly released their respective devilish treasures. However, before they had a chance to do anything, a burst of bright green light suddenly erupted from the forest down below, following which a massive light formation with a diameter of around half a kilometer emerged, releasing a vast expanse of five-colored light as it appeared. "Look out!" The devilish beings were instantly swept up by the five-colored light mid cries of alarm, following which all of them were immediately enveloped by countless azure runes. Within the five-colored light, the burly devilish lord hurriedly raised his copper mirror above his head to release a pillar of black light. Meanwhile, the four spatial tempering stage devilish beings let loose a loud cry in unison, as piercing crimson light began to radiate from their bodies at the same time. A resounding boom rang out as the pillar of black light pierced through the five-colored light in a flash, following which the burly devilish lord stumbled out into the open. However, the other devilish beings all instantly vanished within the five-colored light, leaving only the devilish lord behind by himself. The devilish lord cast his gaze toward the crumbling light formation and let loose an enraged roar. "That's the confounding Five Mountains formation. I didn't think that you'd be so knowledgeable in the art of formations. It seems that it wasn't a fluke that you managed to make it this far." A calm male voice rang out in the distance in response, following which a streak of azure light appeared on the horizon. Chapter 2165, Battle of the Wood Tribe 4. A ferocious look flashed through the burly devilish lord's eyes, and he immediately tossed his copper mirror up into the air before expelling a mouthful of blood essence, which transformed into a cloud of blood mist that seeped into the mirror. In the next instant, a loud buzzing sound rang out from the mirror, and a pavilion-sized ghostly face emerged from within it. The sinister ghostly face hovered in midair with its eyes closed, and the burly devilish lord quickly pointed at it, following which it immediately opened its eyes, which were filled with dazzling black light. At the same time, it let loose a bone-chilling cackle before opening its mouth to blast forth a burst of ferocious black flames, catching the streak of azure light completely off guard and engulfing it in the blink of an eye. What a fool! Even with a protective divine spirit treasure, one wouldn't be able to last long within my infernal devilish flames, the burly devilish lord chortled while controlling the ghostly face. The inky black devilish flames converged into a ball at his behest, then rose up as a thick pillar of flames that trapped the streak of azure light firmly within it. Is that so? Perhaps other people wouldn't be able to withstand these flames for long, but for me, breaking free is an easy task. A calm male voice rang out from within the pillar of black flames, following which the pleasant cry of a bird sounded. A ball of silver light then erupted forth, completely disregarding the devilish flames and rising up to the top of the fiery pillar before transforming into a giant silver bird that was several hundred feet in length. The bird was shimmering with silver light, and as it spread its wings, all of its feathers burst into flames, causing the air temperature to spike dramatically while the entire sky turned a shade of bright red. From a distance, it looked as if a silver sun had risen up above the black pillar of flames. The burly devilish lord's heart jolted upon seeing this, and he immediately tried to make another hand seal, but it was already too late. The massive silver bird raised its head and let loose a long cry, then opened its beak to expel a burst of suction force. The pillar of flames down below instantly began to surge into the silver bird's beak as countless black threads, and within the span of just a few breaths, the fiery pillar had become extremely feeble, revealing an azure humanoid figure within it. The humanoid figure didn't appear to be using any treasures, and his protective spiritual light alone was enough to keep the remaining black devilish flames at bay. The burly devilish lord drew a sharp breath upon seeing this, and he almost couldn't believe his own eyes. He was more aware than anyone of how powerful his own infernal devilish flames were, and the fact that this man was able to keep it at bay with his protective spiritual light alone, instantly, made the devilish lord think that he was perhaps facing a grand ascension stage being. This thought immediately made him turn extremely pale and sent cold sweat pouring down his back. All of a sudden, he sprang up before pointing a finger at the ghostly face overhead, then roared the word "explode." Immediately thereafter, his arms detached themselves from his body before instantly exploding into two clouds of blood mist that enveloped him in a flash. At the same time, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the giant ghostly face, and it exploded amid a flash of black light, sending countless thin black threads erupting forth in a frenzy to form a gargantuan net that descended toward Han Li. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately thrusted a palm upward while waving his other sleeve nonchalantly toward the distance. A massive golden hand projection that was around an acre in size instantly appeared before grabbing toward the giant net, and the entire net of black threads was torn apart with ease. Meanwhile, a loud thunderclap erupted out of Han Li's sleeve, and a bolt of golden lightning shot forth before vanishing in a flash. In the next instant, the bolt of golden lightning reappeared right above the burly devilish lord, who was about to fly away and retreat as a streak of crimson light, then came crashing down upon him at an incredible speed. The golden lightning instantly eradicated the blood mist above his head, then hurtled down toward him with unstoppable force. The burly devilish lord hurriedly shot back in retreat upon seeing this, then opened his mouth to release a shimmering, yellow flying dagger, which flew directly toward the oncoming bolt of golden lightning. The two clashed, and the golden lightning vanished in a flash, but the yellow dagger also became completely dull and devoid of luster before falling out of the heavens like a piece of scrap metal. With Han Li's current powers, his divine Devilbane lightning had become extremely potent against devilish treasures. As a result of the damage sustained by the flying dagger, the burly devilish lord's face paled as he threw up a mouthful of blood. However, black light suddenly erupted from his body as he continued to retreat, completely disregarding the falling dagger. "I commend your decisiveness, but I'm afraid that won't be enough for you to escape me," Han Li said in an expressionless manner before taking a large stride forward. Before he had even completed his stride, a loud thunderclap rang out beneath him, and countless arcs of silver lightning surged out of the sole of his foot before instantly forming a silver lightning formation that was around 10 feet in size. As soon as he stepped into the formation, he vanished without a trace, then appeared several thousand feet away in the blink of an eye. The burly devilish lord had only just heaved a sigh of relief when a thunderclap suddenly rang out in front of him, following which a silver lightning formation appeared without any warning. Almost at the exact same moment, Han Li stepped out of the center of the formation. The burly devilish lord was greatly alarmed to see this, and he immediately tried to flee toward another direction. However, a giant projection with 3 heads and 6 arms suddenly emerged behind Han Li, and it opened its 6 eyes before swinging its 6 arms through the air in unison as soon as it appeared. Golden light flashed, and 6 giant golden swords, each of which was around 10 feet in length, appeared in its hands before being slashed toward the distance. 6 streaks of golden sword chi were unleashed before forming a golden thread that swept through the burly devilish lord's body in a flash. A howl of anguish rang out as the devilish lord's protective treasures and body were instantly sliced in half, upon which a panicked black nascent soul instantly emerged within a ball of yellow light. However, before the nascent soul had a chance to get away, the 6 streaks of sword chi swept back in unison to erase it off the face of this realm. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and the golden projection behind him silently disappeared. It had only taken him an instant to kill this mid-body integration stage devilish lord, from the moment that the latter had self-detonated his treasure and arms to escape. With the array of powerful treasures up his sleeve, this devilish lord was no less powerful than the average late-body integration stage being, but he was obviously no match for Han Li. Within a peculiar space enshrouded within 5-colored light, 4 giant ape-like devilish beings were hovering in midair with crimson light flashing from their furry bodies, while a faint odor of blood and gore wafted through the air. They were surrounded by a dozen or so green-skinned wood tribe beings, all of whom wore grim expressions. In the air above them was a woman wearing a cold expression with her arms crossed. There was a pair of crimson wings spread open on her back, and there were golden and silver runes flashing all over the wings. The woman was none other than Xianxia of the Xianxia race, and even she was appraising the 4 spatial tempering stage devilish beings with a wary look in her eyes. I had thought that the boundless blood devilish arts had become defunct in the elder devil realm, but who would have thought that I would encounter it today? Looks like I was right to have come here to face the 4 of you in person, Xianxia said in a cold voice. Seeing as you recognize our boundless blood devilish arts, then hurry up and get these fools to stand down. If they try to battle us, they'll only be offering up their blood essence to us, one of the 4 devilish beings replied. If you were all at the body integration stage, even the early body integration stage, I would flee the scene with them right away, but you're only at the spatial tempering stage. Even with the boundless blood devilish arts, you're no match for all of us. Attack! As soon as an opportunity arises, I'll strike to kill all 4 of them, Xianxia instructed with a cold smile. The wood tribe beings were very wary toward the 4 devilish beings, but they still sprang into action without any hesitation at Xianxia's behest. Some of the wood tribe beings raised both hands up into the air to release countless streaks of azure light, while others opened their mouths to expel bursts of viscous azure chi, which transformed into ropes swept toward the four devilish beings. Chapter 2166, Battle of the Wood Tribe 5. Even though these wood tribe beings weren't using any special cultivation arts, they had fought together on many past occasions, so their attacks and teamwork were completely seamless. The four spatial tempering stage devilish beings instantly formed a circle with their backs facing one another, then each thrust a palm forward. They didn't appear to be exerting much force with their palm strikes, but fierce crimson shockwaves instantly swept forth in all directions. Black runes could be seen within the crimson shockwaves, and the odor of blood and gore suddenly became a lot more pungent. As soon as the azure streaks of light and azure chi came into contact with the crimson shockwaves, they were immediately immobilized before quickly melting away at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. The surrounding wood tribe beings' expressions changed drastically upon seeing this, and they quickly switched to using all types of flying swords and treasures instead. In the face of the oncoming treasures, the four devilish beings thrust forward their other palms like lightning, and the black runes within the crimson shockwaves instantly began to swell drastically in size. A string of resounding booms rang out, and all of the treasures were repelled as if they had struck a giant mountain. The four devilish beings harumphed coldly as the crimson shockwaves continued to spread outward, while the black runes transformed into black vortexes of different sizes, targeting all of the surrounding wood tribe beings at once. "Look out, don't take those attacks head-on," Xianxia yelled as her expression changed drastically, and at the same time, she made a grabbing motion to summon a translucent dagger before slashing it downward without any hesitation. A streak of white light that was over 1,000 feet in length was released by the dagger before slashing down toward the crimson shockwaves. Even though these wood tribe beings weren't her brethren, it would not be a good look for her if they were to all perish under her command. After hearing Xianxia's words of warning, the wood tribe beings immediately shot back in retreat in an alarmed manner. However, two of them were too slow to react and were swept up by the crimson shockwaves, upon which their protective treasures and spiritual light were instantly destroyed, while their bodies exploded amid two howls of anguish before being absorbed as energy by the crimson shockwaves. The remaining wood tribe beings' faces all paled upon seeing this. Thankfully, the massive streak of light came crashing down at this moment, and the crimson shockwaves were split down the middle, rendering them unable to attack any further. The remaining wood tribe beings hurriedly fled to the edges of the five-colored light, with fearful looks on their faces. The boundless blood devilish arts unleashed by the four devilish beings was far more powerful than they could imagine. "Looks like you're planning to step in. You should have done this from the beginning, but even so, the outcome will still be the same. You'll be absorbed by us as energy just like everyone else." One of the devilish beings chortled with glee while all of them made hand seals in unison. All of a sudden, piercing crimson light erupted out of their backs, instantly inundating all of their bodies. Xianxia immediately sent her small dagger flying through the air upon seeing this, and at the same time, she swept both sleeves through the air to release two balls of crimson light. The translucent dagger instantly released countless arcs of lightning that formed a giant white blade that was over 100 feet in size before crashing down toward the crimson light with devastating force, sending countless wind blades and bolts of lightning raining down alongside it. Meanwhile, the two balls of crimson light transformed into a pair of monsters with ape heads and wolf bodies. Both of them had a pair of green bat wings on each of their backs, and their bodies were as red as blood. Their mouths were filled with sharp fangs, and each of them had a snake-like forked tongue. The ruthless and cunning looks in their red demonic eyes suggested that they possessed a high level of intelligence, and sharp claws suddenly shot out of their fingertips as they swooped down amid ferocious roars. A furry fist suddenly emerged from the crimson light down below, striking the giant blade and sending it flying backward, while the fist itself remained completely unscathed. At the same time, bursts of thunderous crimson sound waves swept upward, forcing the pair of oncoming monsters to slow down significantly in their descent. Meanwhile, another giant crimson fist emerged off to the side amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, then lashed out like lightning to send the pair of monsters flying with a vicious blow. The two monsters tumbled through the air for over 100 feet, and most of their bodies had been destroyed. As for the two giant crimson fists, They merely vanished as if they had never even appeared in the first place. Fei Zioxy drew a sharp breath upon seeing this, and she immediately withdrew the giant blade, which reverted back into a small dagger as it flew back toward her. At the same time, she pointed a finger at the pair of monsters, and their severely damaged bodies instantly fully regenerated. The pair of monsters snarled at the crimson light down below, but didn't dare to swoop down again. In the next instant, the crimson light suddenly shattered like a piece of chinaware, revealing a crimson-furred giant that was over 100 feet tall. The giant had a pair of green eyes, and as it clenched its hands into fists, a string of loud cracks and pops instantly rang out from its body. At the same time, it released an aura that was no less fearsome than that of a late body integration stage being. Simultaneously, a band of thick crimson light appeared before revolving around its body, making it impossible for anyone to approach the giant. Fei Zioxy's expression darkened significantly upon seeing this, and she knew that she had encountered a truly powerful enemy. She immediately issued an instruction toward the surrounding wood tribe beings before flipping a hand over to produce a green formation flag, which she swept through the air toward the crimson giant. The five-colored light in the surrounding area instantly began to surge as bursts of invisible restrictive fluctuations filled the entire space. The wood tribe beings were immediately forced to plummet downward as if there were a burst of power dragging them down, but they all calmly chanted an incantation, and green light flashed over their bodies, following which everything immediately returned to normal. In contrast, the crimson giant merely swayed slightly before steadying itself in midair. However, the restriction activated by Fei Zioxy had clearly enraged it, and it let loose a furious roar before lashing out with one of its massive fists. A burst of crimson shockwaves that was several times more viscous than the previous ones surged forth before transforming into a crimson worm that pounced directly toward Fei Zioxy. At the same time, the band of crimson light revolving around the giant's body released rings of crimson mist that swept toward the surrounding wood tribe beings. Fei Zioxy wore a cold expression as she abruptly flapped her wings, upon which countless golden and silver runes emerged before transforming into small golden and silver swords that rained down from above. Immediately thereafter, she opened her mouth to release a ball of white light, within which was a small pagoda that quickly swelled to several 100 feet tall before crashing down with astonishing might. The two ape-headed monsters also let loose long howls before transforming into a pair of balls of crimson light that descended from above, one from the left and one from the right. At the same time, the surrounding wood tribe beings all retreated into the five-colored light, using the restriction to ward off the crimson shockwaves while releasing treasures to attack the crimson giant. Letter 1D453, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D626, letter 212F, letter 1D638, letter 1D626. Letter 1D450, letter 1D45C, letter 1D4C2. All of a sudden, Han Li vanished on the spot within the five-colored light. In the next instant, he re-emerged within a vast gray space, and his expression changed slightly as he inspected his surroundings. Taoist Zai was hovering in midair up ahead, with a pair of bodies that had been completely charred black suspended in the air nearby. The ground down below had been severely ravaged, clearly indicating that a fierce battle had just taken place. It's truly incredible that you were able to take care of those two devilish lords so quickly, Brother Zai, Han Li praised with a faint smile. Those two decided to use lightning against me, so they naturally weren't going to last very long, Taoist Zai replied in an expressionless manner. All right, now that the three devilish lords have been taken care of, let's go lend fellow Taoist Fei a hand. Those four spatial tempering stage devilish beings are no ordinary beings, Han Li said. Chapter 2167, Battle of the Wood Tribe 6. It's up to you, Taoist Zai replied in a completely uncaring manner. Han Li nodded before pointing a finger at the pair of devilish bodies, releasing two crimson balls of fire that quickly incinerated the bodies into ashes. At the same time, he made a grabbing motion with his other hand to summon a green formation plate. Just as Han Li was about to use the formation plate to teleport him and Taoist Zai out of this space, an earth-shattering boom suddenly rang out up above, and the entire space began to tremor violently as if it were about to collapse. Han Li was quite startled by this and didn't dare to delay any longer as he immediately tossed his formation plate forward, which formed a light formation amid a flash of white light. Immediately thereafter, he arrived at the center of the formation, followed closely by Taoist Zai. Han Li cast an incantation seal, and the light formation released a burst of piercing white light alongside a loud buzzing sound, following which he and Taoist Zai instantly disappeared. In the next instant, countless white rifts appeared in the surrounding space, and it really did collapse amid a string of loud cracks. In the air above a nondescript mountain, spatial fluctuations erupted, and a white light formation appeared, containing both Han Li and Taoist Zai. Han Li wore a dark expression, while Taoist Zai's expression was as neutral as ever. What happened? Why did the restrictions suddenly fail? Han Li asked in a grim voice as the light formation reverted back into a green formation plate and returned to his hand. Bad news, Brother Han. The Holy Tree tells me that the third formation core has been destroyed, which means that we'll no longer be able to use some of the restrictions in this formation, and the power of the other restrictions will also be weakened. Cao Jai's grave voice replied from the formation plate. Han Li's heart jolted upon hearing this, and he hurriedly asked, "A formation core has already been destroyed. How is that possible? How did the devilish beings find it so quickly? Even if they managed to find it, how were they able to destroy it so quickly with other body integration stage fellow Taoists guarding it?" "Hold on, I've just received a message from a fallen fellow Taoist at the third formation core sent before he passed away. This is bad. 6 sacred ancestor clones had arrived together to kill all of the fellow Taoists and destroy the third formation core. It seems that someone among the devilish army also has a very good understanding of the formation, and those sacred ancestor clones were able to track down the third formation core right away," Cao Jai replied in a furious voice. "If there's someone within the devilish army with a very good understanding of the formation, then our formation core and the first formation core will most likely be attacked soon by sacred ancestor clones as well. The defensive restrictions of the formation will be effective against normal devilish lords, but they won't be able to stop sacred ancestor clones for long. Fellow Taoist Cao, don't worry about conserving the formation's energy and expand the restriction sensory range by twofold. Inform me as soon as you discover something. I'll take care of our opponents here quickly so I can face the incoming enemies," Han Li instructed in an implacable voice. "All right, I'll do my best, Brother Han," Cao Jai agreed through gritted teeth after a brief hesitation. After that, the light from the formation plate faded, and Han Li was silent for a moment before suddenly chuckling. He, looks like this mission won't be as simple as it first seemed. Brother Zai, let's go and take care of the current set of enemies first." Han Li then pointed a finger at the formation plate, and spatial fluctuations instantly began to surge through the air around them. A burst of 5-colored light swept past, and he and Taoist Zai instantly vanished on the spot. Elsewhere within the 5-colored light, Fei Xiaoxi had already pulled out all the stops and was opposing a dozen or so crimson worms with several colorful balls of light. These crimson worms all had bright crimson chi that contained boundless blood essence swirling around their bodies, and they were extremely fierce and vicious. At this point, the number of Wood Tribe beings hidden within the light restriction had been reduced to only 9, but they were still using their treasures to attack the red-furred giant with all their might. However, all of those attacks were easily kept at bay by the revolving bands of crimson light, which would release crimson shockwaves in retaliation, knocking back the treasures and causing the protective restriction around the Wood Tribe beings to waver perilously. The fallen Wood Tribe beings had clearly all been killed by the crimson shockwaves that had managed to scatter the 5-colored light, and at this point, the 2 ape-headed monsters had already transformed into around a dozen projections that were unleashing countless claw projections toward the furred giant, but they didn't dare to get too close to it. Even though Fei Xiaoxi was just barely managing to keep the giant's attacks at bay, she had been completely forced onto the back foot. As for the giant, it was swinging its huge arms through the air with black runes surging around its body, and the crimson worms that it was controlling were gradually becoming thicker and larger. Fei Xiaoxi was still able to maintain a calm expression, but internally she was starting to grow quite anxious. She had thought that with her cultivation base advantage and the dozen or so spatial tempering stage beings assisting her, she would be able to trump her enemies' special cultivation method, but she was quickly discovering that she had made a grave error. The boundless blood devilish arts was extremely powerful, and the crimson worms it created were no less powerful than actual worms. Fei Xiaoxi had unleashed powerful abilities to kill a few of those worms, but they were easily replaced with a wave of the furred giant's hand. If she were to target the giant instead of those worms, then her attacks would simply be thwarted by the bands of crimson light. So under these circumstances, Fei Xiaoxi could only rely on the formation's power to slowly wear down the giant. but the situation was gradually worsening for her. Just as she was considering requesting assistance from Cao Jai, a rumbling boom suddenly rang out beside her, and two humanoid figures emerged amid a flash of five-colored light. They were none other than Han Li and Taoist Zai. Fei Zioxi was stunned by the sight of them. Interesting. As I suspected, those four spatial tempering stage devilish beings are manifested by the same being. To think that they're able to force you onto the back foot, the devilish arts they're cultivating must be quite extraordinary, Han Li said with a hint of surprise and intrigue in his eyes. Brother Han, why are you here? Could it be that you've already taken care of your opponents? Fei Zioxi asked with a complex expression. Indeed, the other enemies have already been eradicated. Let me give you a hand here, Han Li replied with a nod, and before Fei Zioxi had a chance to say anything further, he made a hand seal and instantly transformed into a giant golden ape that was over 1,000 feet tall amid a flash of brilliant golden light. As soon as the giant ape appeared, it made a grabbing motion with both hands, and two balls of light, one black and one azure, emerged in his palms before transforming into a pair of small mountains. A thunderous roar rang out as Han Li's arms expanded even further, and he then hurled his pair of mountains viciously toward the crimson-furred giant. A sharp screeching sound pierced through the heavens, and the pair of mountains blurred before transforming into a pair of balls of light that vanished in a flash. The crimson-furred giant had become extremely panicked at the sight of Han Li and Taoist Zai, and it was already beginning to think of ways to escape. However, before it had a chance to do anything, Han Li had already unleashed his attack, and the giant immediately attempted to extricate itself from its battle against Fei Zioxi, but it was already too late. Crimson light flashed violently from the giant's body, and a resounding boom suddenly rang out as the pair of extreme mountains re-emerged out of thin air before crashing directly toward it. A look of alarm and fury immediately appeared on the giant's face, and it didn't have time to summon its crimson worms back to itself, so it could only transform the band of crimson light around itself into a massive crimson shield that was several tens of feet tall and around a foot thick. A pair of resounding booms rang out almost in unison, and the crimson shield was extremely powerful, but the pair of extreme mountains hurled with the extraordinary strength of the giant mountain ape was far too overwhelming for it to withstand. The first extreme mountain only faltered slightly upon striking the crimson shield, but countless thin cracks instantly appeared on the shield. By the time the second extreme mountain crashed into the first one, the crimson shield was instantly shattered without being able to offer any further resistance. Thus, the two extreme mountains hurtled directly toward the crimson-furred giant, whose face paled significantly as it let loose a thunderous roar. All of a sudden, the black runes surging around its arms suddenly transformed into a pair of black gauntlets, and it lashed out viciously at the oncoming pair of extreme mountains. At the same time, its body swelled drastically in size, and its aura was inflated by almost twofold as countless crimson threads erupted out of its fur in unison. It was clear that it had unleashed a secret technique that was burning through its latent potential as a final roll of the dice. Chapter 2168, Battle of the Wood Tribe 7. A pair of dull thumps rang out, and in the instant the crimson-furred giant's fists struck the extreme mountains, they instantly exploded into two clouds of blood mist. The giant's entire body shuddered violently as it was sent flying backward involuntarily by the force of the impact, but the pair of extreme mountains instantly appeared on either side of the giant before mercilessly converging toward the middle. A massive rumbling boom erupted as the two extreme mountains crashed into one another, and a blood-curdling howl rang out before instantly being cut off. All of a sudden, four balls of light suddenly shot forth out of the blood mist between the pair of extreme mountains, then desperately fled in different directions. Those were none other than the nascent souls of the four spatial tempering stage devilish beings. It's too late to try and get away now. Han Li harumphed coldly as he thrust a giant furry palm toward the distance, and the space within a radius of around half a kilometer around the pair of extreme mountains warped violently from the force of his palm. The four nascent souls didn't even get a chance to cry out before they disintegrated into specks of spiritual light, and a faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he quickly reverted back to his human form. The surrounding Wood Tribe beings were completely dumbfounded by what they had just seen, and Fei Zioxi's reaction wasn't much different. The powerful foe that was on the verge of overwhelming her had been slain by Han Li in what seemed like the blink of an eye, and this was simply incredible for someone as proud as she was. However, just as she forced a smile onto her own face and was about to say something, a burst of buzzing suddenly rang out from within Han Li's sleeve. Han Li's expression changed slightly as he immediately released a ball of green light out of his sleeve, which landed in his hand and revealed itself to be a formation plate. He quickly pointed his finger at the formation plate a few times, following which he was immediately greeted by Cao Jai's panicked voice. "Bad news, Brother Han. 5 devilish beings suspected to be sacred ancestor clones have been detected nearby, and they're rapidly approaching our formation core. I've already activated all of the restrictions to slow them down, but I'm afraid it won't delay them for long. Have you taken care of the current set of enemies yet?" Fei Xiaoxi and the other Wood Tribe beings were greatly alarmed to hear this, and Han Li's expression also darkened slightly as he asked in a grim voice, "Rest assured, I've already taken care of the devilish beings here. Can you confirm that the approaching devilish beings are sacred ancestor clones and not just normal devilish lords?" "That's great to hear. Judging from the powers displayed by the 5 devilish beings, they should all be at the late body integration stage. Aside from sacred ancestor clones, there's no way that there would be such a large cluster of such powerful devilish beings. This group should be different from the ones that attacked the 3rd formation core. It seems that the devilish army really has deployed all of these clones to attack our 3 formation cores. Would you be able to stall them and buy me some time, Brother Han?" Cao Jai asked in an urgent yet hopeful voice. "Do you have something up your sleeve, fellow Taoist Cao?" Han Li asked as his eyes narrowed slightly. "If you can stall those sacred ancestor clones for an hour, I'll be able to absorb enough energy from the formation to use a secret technique that'll allow me to combine as one with the backup tree and unleash a powerful restriction to temporarily trap those sacred ancestor clones," Cao Jai hurriedly replied. "If such a thing were possible, how was the 3rd formation core destroyed so quickly?" Han Li asked with a hint of surprise in his voice. The sacred ancestor clones had arrived too quickly for the fellow Taoists at the 3rd formation core to use this secret technique, so they were overwhelmed before they could do anything, Cao Jai replied with a wry smile. "I see. Brother Zai and I will do our best to hold the sacred ancestor clones off for an hour. Teleport us to an area near them," Han Li replied with a faint smile. Cao Jai was greatly reinvigorated upon hearing this, and he was clearly very confident in the restriction. "All right, if you can buy me that much time, then I'll be able to protect this formation for sure." "Fairy Fei, I'm sure you heard fellow Taoist Cao's message. Go back to protect the formation core and leave the sacred ancestor clones to Brother Zai and myself. You can all go back with her as well," Han Li said to Fei Xiaoxi and the Wood Tribe beings as he stowed his formation plate away. Fei Xiaoxi had only just recovered somewhat from her astonishment, and her expression changed a few times before she sighed. "All right, I'll leave everything to you and go back to protect Brother Cao then." Before Han Li could say anything in response, she immediately made a hand seal and flew away as a streak of light, followed closely by the Wood Tribe beings who had accompanied her. Han Li looked on at their departing figures with a calm expression, but a cold smile soon appeared on his face. 5 sacred ancestor clones, eh? That'll be quite a handful. I'm sure other sacred ancestor clones will also get here soon. Let's go, Brother Zai. If we can kill all of these sacred ancestor clones, then I'm sure the morale of the devilish army will be severely dampened. As soon as his voice trailed off, Han Li waved a hand toward Taoist Zai, who instantly vanished on the spot before arriving beside Han Li. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted all around them, and countless specks of light converged to form a colorful formation beneath the duo. Han Li stood at the center of the formation and casually cast an incantation seal toward the edge, following which both of them were inundated by a flash of light and disappeared in a flash. Shortly after their departure, the colorful light formation also disintegrated amid a dull thump. High up in the air close to 100 kilometers away, 5 high-grade devilish beings in different attire had just laid waste to a restriction comprised of a sea of flames, and they were just about to advance onward when Han Li and Taoist Zai suddenly appeared before them amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. The 5 devilish beings faltered slightly before cold smiles appeared on their faces, but they didn't attack right away, choosing to inspect Han Li's duo with intrigued expressions instead. Han Li also appraised the 5 devilish beings in an expressionless manner, to find that there were 3 men and 2 women. One of the men was a heavily wrinkled, green-robed elderly man, with a pair of remarkably long eyes that were flashing with a cold light. The other 2 were both burly armored men with hideous features, giving off ferocious, baleful auras. As for the two women, both of them were extremely beautiful. One of them was quite petite and gave off an indescribable sense of allure, while the other was quite tall and slender with a cold expression, and a pair of black feathered wings on her back. Two late body integration stage beings, who's going to take care of them? The green-robed elderly man was the first to break the silence. Time is of the essence. With each passing moment, hundreds of our brethren are being killed, so leave these two to me and go on ahead. A golden-armored burly man with a pair of horns on his head replied before suddenly making a grabbing motion, upon which a giant black axe that was several tens of feet in length appeared in his grasp. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D493, letter 1D4E, letter 1D65A, letter 1D500, letter 1D486, letter 1D658, letter 1D490, letter 1D4AT. All right, with your powers, you should be able to take care of those two with no issues. Let's keep going, the elderly man replied with a nonchalant nod, then vanished as a gentle breeze. The other armored man had an extra eye on his glabella, and he stomped a foot onto the ground and vanished into thin air as a thick bolt of lightning, while the two devilish women exchanged a smiling glance before preparing to leave as well. Almost at the exact same moment, the axe-wielding burly man abruptly raised his giant axe before swinging it viciously toward Han Li and Taoist Zai. An inky black blade projection that was several hundred feet in length was instantly unleashed, and it hurtled directly toward Han Li's duo like lightning, leaving a trail of white spatial cracks in its wake. None of you are getting away. A cold light flashed through Han Li's eyes as he made a hand seal, and a giant projection with 3 heads and 6 arms appeared behind him amid a flash of brilliant golden light. The projection opened its 6 eyes, and a massive golden sword appeared in each of its hands before immediately being slashed through the air in unison. 6 golden sword projections instantly swept forth, then suddenly vanished into thin air in the blink of an eye. At this point, the black axe projection had also arrived, and in response, Taoist Zai stepped forward in a nonchalant manner, positioning himself in front of Han Li before raising a finger and casually pointing it at the oncoming axe projection. Chapter 2169, Battle of the Wood Tribe 8. A speck of golden light suddenly appeared on Taoist Zai's fingertip, then instantly transformed into a golden ball of light with a diameter of around 10 feet. The black axe projection struck the ball of light in a completely soundless manner, but in the next instant, the ball of light flashed violently a few times before self-detonating, unleashing bursts of golden shockwaves that swept toward the axe projection in retaliation. Golden and black light intertwined, and the black axe projection was unable to advance any further. A look of surprise appeared on the golden-armored man's face, while a series of balls of golden light erupted out of thin air around Han Li, then shot forth in all directions as countless thin sword projections. Spatial fluctuations erupted within these sword projections, and a pair of humanoid figures were forced to reveal themselves. One of them had gusts of fierce winds revolving around his body to sweep away the oncoming sword projections, while the other was surrounded by arcs of lightning that eradicated all of the nearby sword projections with ease. These two were none other than the green-robed elderly man and the 3-eyed armored man. The two of them were clearly very surprised to have been forced out of thin air, and they immediately turned toward Han Li with vicious expressions. The two devilish women were also quite taken aback by this, and the two exchanged a surprised glance. HMPH, you've got some backbone. Do you really think the two of you can contend with all 5 of us? Have you deluded yourselves into thinking that you're both grand ascension stage beings? Do you have a death wish? The green-robed elderly man harumphed coldly. I'm no grand ascension cultivator, but you're not true sacred ancestors either, so what do I have to fear? Han Li replied with a calm smile. What a big mouth you have. Fellow Taoists, it looks like we'll have to take care of him before we can continue onward. Let's kill him together, then continue on our way, the elderly man said as a cold light flashed through his eyes. Even though he didn't know why Han Li was so confident, a hint of peril had suddenly welled up in his heart, and he knew that he couldn't treat Han Li lightly. Don't stick your noses into this battle. These two are my opponents. Do you really think I can't take care of a pair of body integration stage beings? The golden-armored man roared with a furious expression. His 4 companions were just about to spring into action, but they couldn't help but falter slightly upon hearing this. Brother Niu, have you forgotten the orders we received? The outcome of this battle hinges on our success. This is no time for you to be throwing a fit. If we lose this battle because of you, then you'll have to answer to our masters." The elderly man threatened in a cold voice as his expression darkened slightly. The golden-armored man shuddered upon hearing this before quickly forcing a smile onto his own face. Ahaha, forgive me for getting so worked up, brother Shi. I'm well aware of how important mission is. In that case, let's strike together. These two seem to have some tricks up their sleeves, so it would be best to kill them as quickly as possible." Han Li was left feeling rather speechless at the sight of how quickly the golden-armored man's attitude had shifted, but the elderly man was completely unsurprised to see this. Instead, he issued an instruction in a completely expressionless manner, and the 5 devilish beings instantly surrounded Han Li's duo. The 5 of them appeared to be moving slowly, but all of them had prepared vast amounts of magic power and were no longer hiding their fearsome auras. So they really are all sacred ancestor clones. "Brother Zai, how many of them can you take on?" Han Li asked as his eyes narrowed slightly. "I can kill 2 or trap 3, Taoist Zai replied nonchalantly, as if he were merely talking about the weather. "All right, then I'll leave 3 of them to you and take on the remaining 2, Han Li replied without any hesitation. "No problem," Taoist Zai replied. "Hee, you two sure dare to talk big. Take this." The golden-armored man was furious upon hearing what was being said, and a mountainous cow head projection instantly appeared behind him amid a flash of black light, following which he hoisted his massive black axe before swinging it viciously toward Han Li again. This attack was different from the previous one in that on this occasion, thousands of axe projections were unleashed, all of which had black devilish chi revolving around them, and were directed straight toward Han Li's duo. The golden-armored man's action seemed to have ignited the killing intent in the hearts of the other devilish beings, and they all attacked at once. A fierce look appeared on the elderly man's face as he swept his sleeves through the air, releasing 2 swarms of bright red poisonous hornets, each of which was around the size of a finger. These hornets were all giving off a pungent rank odor, and they flew rapidly toward Han Li and Taoist Zai as soon as they were released. Meanwhile, the 3-eyed devilish being made a hand seal, and the 3rd eye on his glabella sprang open, revealing red, yellow, and green light swirling within his pupils before 3 dazzling pillars of light were unleashed. The pillars of light reached Taoist Zai in a soundless manner in a flash, and at the same time, the petite devilish woman rubbed her hands together before raising them in unison, releasing countless pink threads of light that converged to form a massive pink net before descending from above. Accompanying the net was a faint fragrance, and upon inhaling this scent, even Han Li was feeling rather light-headed, which was rather alarming to him. As for the final winged devilish woman, she flapped her wings gently, and specks of black light appeared behind her amid a burst of glacial chi. The woman harumphed coldly as the specks of black light shot forth, transforming into black ice spikes mid-flight, taking up almost half of the entire sky with their massive numbers. In the face of this string of attacks, a loud thunderclap erupted behind Han Li, and a pair of translucent wings appeared on his back amid a flash of lightning. He then let loose a low cry as he abruptly flapped his wings, and he instantly vanished on the spot amid a loud thunderclap. Thus, Taoist Zai was the only one left at the center of all of the attacks, but he merely disregarded the oncoming barrage as he took a step forward. Golden light flashed from his body, following which a dense golden light barrier appeared around him, and the light barrier was immediately inundated by the pillars of light, axe projections, ice spikes, and the pink net of threads. Resounding booms rang out relentlessly as dazzling lights intertwined, and the surrounding space warped violently as astonishing shockwaves swept forth in all directions. The 2 swarms of red hornets didn't dare to approach the epicenter of the clashes and could only unleash streaks of crimson light from afar, further contributing to the assault. However, the golden light barrier seemed to be an impregnable fortress, and it didn't waver in the slightest in the face of the ferocious attacks raining down upon it. Meanwhile, Taoist Zai stood completely still within the golden light barrier, adopting a passive stance without displaying any intention of retaliating. The 5 devilish beings were stunned to see this, and their expressions darkened significantly. Right at this moment, an arc of silver light flashed up above alongside a burst of spatial fluctuations, and Han Li emerged amid a loud thunderclap. He cast his gaze down below, and a cold smile appeared on his face as he made a hand seal to summon his provenance true devil projection again. As soon as the giant projection appeared, it thrust its 6 palms downward in unison, and a ball of golden light comprised of countless golden runes appeared in the palm of each of its hands. cold look appeared on the winged devilish woman's face upon seeing this, and she flapped her wings viciously upward in unison. Two streaks of that were over 100 feet in length instantly appeared before sweeping up toward Han Li, and at the same time, the elderly man raised a thin and wizened palm upward. The palm extended out of his sleeve with purple light flashing incessantly around it, and a massive purple claw projection that was around an acre in size instantly appeared beneath Han Li before grabbing toward him with ferocious might. These sacred ancestor clones were truly far more powerful than normal devilish lords, and devastating attacks were directed toward Han Li as soon as he emerged from his lightning teleportation. The other three devilish lords hadn't attacked him, but that wasn't because they hadn't detected his presence. They were merely of the opinion that the elderly man and winged woman would be enough to take care of Han Li. Han Li was quite elated to see this, and he immediately injected his spiritual power into his provenance true devil projection in a frenzy. Brilliant golden light immediately erupted from the projection, and the balls of light in its hands swelled drastically in size before being hurled downward in unison. Chapter 2170, Battle of the Wood Tribe 9. The 6 golden balls of light quickly combined as one in midair, then transformed into a giant golden vortex. Initially, the vortex was only several tens of feet in size, but as it rapidly rotated, it swelled drastically in area, inflating to cover around an acre. Countless golden and silver runes surged out of the vortex alongside a burst of enormous force, and as soon as the 2 streaks of black light came into contact with the vortex, they were drawn into it by a burst of tremendous suction force before being destroyed. The giant purple claw projection also faltered in the face of the obstruction posed by the countless golden and silver runes, and during this split-second delay, the golden vortex swelled once again by close to half its original size. The air around the giant claw projection immediately tightened, and it was as if a massive mountain were crashing down upon it. The claw projection began to tremor violently in the face of this astonishing force, and it appeared to be on the brink of destruction. At the same time, the 5 devilish beings down below also felt the air around them tight, as they were immobilized by a burst of invisible power. The 5 devilish beings faltered initially upon sensing this, before immediately flaring up with rage. Cries of fury instantly rang out as all types of light and devilish chi erupted from the bodies of the 5 devilish beings to escape from the restrictive force. Yet just as they were about to break free, a peculiar smile appeared on Han Li's face. At the same time, he made a hand seal before abruptly flapping his wings, and an astonishing thunderclap rang out as countless arcs of silver lightning surged out of his wings in a frenzy, then converged to form a pair of massive balls of lightning. Han Li then pointed a finger down at the green-robed elderly man and the winged woman, and the 2 balls of lightning instantly vanished amid a resounding boom. In the next instant, a loud thunderclap erupted as the 2 balls of lightning emerged right in front of the elderly man and winged woman, and countless arcs of silver lightning sprang forth to form a pair of lightning formations. The elderly man and winged woman were each situated at the center of one of the formations. These are teleportation formations. The elderly man's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and a burst of scorching purple flames erupted from his body, instantly nullifying the restrictive force acting upon him. Immediately thereafter, his body blurred as he attempted to escape the lightning formation, but right at this moment, a cold harumph rang out from above, and a burst of excruciating pain instantly speared through the elderly man's head. Even though he was far more powerful than the average body integration cultivator, he still threw his hands over his own head involuntarily, and his body swayed as if he were on the verge of falling. During this split-second delay, the lightning formation was activated, and the elderly man vanished amid a flash of lightning. The winged woman had also been teleported away by the lightning formation beneath her feet, and a smile appeared on Han Li's face as he flapped his wings again, releasing countless arcs of lightning to form another shimmering silver lightning formation. After that, he stepped into the formation and disappeared in a flash, following which the golden vortex disintegrated amid a dull thump. Only then did the remaining 3 devilish beings escape from the restrictive force, and all of them wore expressions of shock and fury. However, the petite woman's expression quickly eased slightly as she said, "They haven't been teleported too far away. I can sense that they're still within 10,000 kilometers of us. If we want to reunite with them, we'll be able to do so very quickly." "That's good to hear. It's a good thing that you can directly communicate with our other fellow Taoists using your secret technique. Otherwise, we'd all be very concerned. The golden-armored man's expression also eased slightly upon hearing this. The three-eyed devilish man was clearly also very relieved to hear this. Yet right at this moment, an earth-shattering boom suddenly erupted nearby. The golden light barrier that was facing the barrage of attacks suddenly exploded as a ball of golden light. Countless streaks of golden light shot forth at once, destroying all of the nearby attacks before piercing into the swarm of red hornets up above in a flash. Countless hornets were instantly killed by the streaks of golden light, with only just over 100 fortunate survivors, all of which immediately scattered in a panicked manner. At the same time, a terrifying aura that struck one with a sense of asphyxiation erupted into the heavens, following which a mountainous golden crab emerged within the golden light. That's the holy crab from the devilish origin sea. It's a faux immortal puppet as powerful as a sacred ancestor. What is it doing here? The golden-armored man and petite woman were stunned by the sight of Taoist Zai's true form, and they immediately began to retreat with horrified expressions as devilish chi surged out of their bodies. It was clear that they were preparing to flee as soon as the giant golden crab made a move. The three-eyed devilish being displayed no intention to flee, but he was also clearly quite astonished. However, a burst of radiance then flashed through his three eyes, upon which a peculiar look appeared on his face. It seems that you've all seen me in the past. I'll make things simple for you. If the three of you wait here until fellow Taoist Han concludes his battle against your companions, then I won't attack you for now. Otherwise, I'll be forced to step in, the giant golden crab said. The petite woman and golden-armored man's faces paled upon hearing this, and they immediately faltered in their retreat. There's no need to be afraid, fellow Taoists. This holy crab's aura is nowhere near what it had been back in the devilish origin sea, and it's currently not even at the grand ascension stage. It seems that this faux immortal puppet's cultivation base has been severely debilitated for some reason, so the three of us should be able to face it. The three-eyed devilish being yelled as he abruptly patted a leather pouch hanging from his waist. A burst of rainbow light swept forth from the opening of the pouch, following which three translucent jade-like skeletons appeared before him. Each of the skeletons held a white bone shield in one hand and a bone hammer in the other, and they were arranged in a row next to one another. All of the skeletons were giving off mid-body integration stage auras. A hint of surprise appeared in the petite woman's eyes, and she hurriedly asked, "Are you sure there's something wrong with this golden crab? Fellow Taoist Ming has cultivated the treasured dharmic eyes, so I'm sure his judgment is reliable. This holy crab won't let us escape anyway, so as opposed to resigning ourselves to being divided and conquered, we may as well join forces to challenge it," the golden-armored man said, with a hint of killing intent in his eyes as he tightened his grip around the shaft of his axe. I had heard rumors that the golden crab had been taken away by a human. I didn't think that I would encounter it here. Seeing as both of you are willing to oppose it, I'll do my best as well, the petite woman said after a brief hesitation. All right, even if we can't defeat this holy crab, we'll definitely be able to stall it for now. Once our fellow Taoists take care of that human cultivator, the five of us will be able to join forces and destroy this faux immortal puppet as well, the three-eyed devilish being said in a confident voice. I certainly hope so, the petite woman replied with a wry smile. The woman recalled that the human cultivator who had taken away the golden crab seemed to be quite powerful, but due to the fact that she had been situated in the spirit realm this entire time, the news that she had received from the holy realm was rather lacking in detail. As such, she merely regarded those rumors as hyperbole and didn't pay them any heed. All right, seeing as we've arrived at a consensus, let's attack together, the golden-armored man guffawed as he opened his mouth to expel a mouthful of blood essence onto his own axe. The blood essence scattered into a cloud of blood mist that instantly vanished into the axe, and the golden-armored man began to chant something, upon which the giant axe quickly turned a bright red color. The axe was then hurled up into the air, and it vanished into space as a streak of crimson light. In the next instant, the sound of rumbling thunder and howling wind rang out as dark clouds converged from out of nowhere, making the entire sky pitch black. A thick silver snake flashed through the air, and a mountainous crimson axe could be seen within the dark clouds. It was several thousand feet in length with wisps of devilish chi emanating from it, and it was giving off an extremely fearsome aura. The three-eyed devilish being and the petite woman exchanged a glance upon seeing this before springing into action as well. Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D4 5F, letter 212F, letter 212F, letter 1D4 64, letter 1D4 52, letter 1D4 4F, letter 1D4 B8, letter 1D4 5C, letter 1D6 2E. The three skeletons in front of the three-eyed devilish being blurred, following which they appeared around the giant golden crab in a triangular formation. They raised their bone shields in defense, then immediately swung their bone hammers through the air. A burst of ghostly howls instantly erupted from the three hammers, alongside fierce black chi, and around a dozen giant tentacles were manifested before sweeping viciously toward the giant crab. Meanwhile, the petite woman opened her mouth to release a shimmering silver gourd, and she pointed a finger at it, upon which a vast expanse of pink light surged forth to manifest a series of pink devilish crows. These crows had golden beaks and silver eyes, creating a very peculiar sight to behold. The petite woman let loose a sharp cry, and the flock of crows was instantly mobilized. In response to all of this, the giant golden crab merely raised its pair of massive pincers, and countless arcs of silver lightning surged out of its body amid a loud thunderclap, forming a huge net of lightning around itself. At the same time, lightning converged toward its pair of pincers, and a pair of massive balls of lightning that were as large as houses were created. Thus, a fierce battle commenced between Taoist Zai and the three devils. Close to 10,000 kilometers away, Han Li was standing in midair between a pair of mountains with a faint smile on his face. The golden projection behind him had already taken on a substantial form, and there were 72 small azure swords surging through the air beneath him, manifesting layers of azure lotus flowers that were carrying his body. Directly across from him were the green-robed elderly man and winged woman, both of whom were glowering intently at him. Chapter 2171, Battle of the Wood Tribe 10. As expected, you're no ordinary body integration cultivator. It's quite remarkable that you were able to teleport both of us here with formations that you created on the spot. However, do you intend to take on both of us on your own? The elderly man asked as he appraised the giant projection behind Han Li with a cautious expression. The two of you are just a pair of clones, so why can't I take on both of you? Han Li chuckled in a nonchalant manner. HMPH, you're going to pay the ultimate price for your arrogance. The elderly man flared up with rage upon hearing this, and he immediately made a hand seal, upon which a burst of crimson light erupted into the heavens behind him, then formed a crimson insect projection that was over 100 feet in length. The projection was of a bright red color and extreme rotund, resembling a giant silkworm. However, its cavernous mouth was filled with sharp fangs, presenting a terrifying sight to behold. As soon as the insect projection appeared, it opened its mouth to expel a burst of crimson light, which split up into countless crimson threads that swept directly toward Han Li. The smile on Han Li's face faded, and the projection behind him raised its 6 arms in unison at his behest. Countless golden fist projections instantly appeared in front of him, then transformed into balls of golden light to oppose the crimson threads. A string of resounding booms rang out in rapid succession, and the golden fist projections exploded as soon as they came into contact with the crimson threads, but the threads were all kept at bay as a result. The elderly man harumphed coldly upon seeing this, and he quickly made a hand seal before pointing a finger at the crimson threads. All of a sudden, the threads began to sway and twist as if they had come alive, then vanished into thin air in a flash. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted in front of Han Li, and countless crimson threads emerged before raining down upon him in a torrential downpour. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately flew back by several tens of feet. At the same time, the azure sword lotuses beneath his feet swelled drastically to form several layers of azure light barriers before him. As soon as the crimson threads flew into the azure sword barriers, they were instantly shredded. Despite the sheer number of crimson threads, not even a single one of them was able to pierce through the light barriers, and they all disintegrated into clouds of blood mist. Strangely enough, not only was the elderly man not disappointed to see this, a peculiar smile appeared on his face. Right at this moment, Han Li suddenly cast his gaze toward the winged woman as if he had detected something. A burst of blue light flashed through his eyes, and his expression darkened slightly as he quickly released his enormous spiritual sense all around himself. Immediately thereafter, one of his arms expanded drastically in size amid a string of loud cracks and pops, following which he threw a punch behind himself like lightning. His fist instantly turned a shimmering golden color, and a burst of loud thunderclaps accompanied his punch. At the same time, A burst of barely detectable spatial fluctuations erupted before his fist, following which a semi-transparent winged figure emerged in a wraith-like manner. The golden fist hurtled directly toward the winged figure's head in a merciless manner, and it looked as if this were a choreographed sequence where the winged figure had set itself up to be punched. A hint of surprise appeared on the winged figure's pale face upon seeing this, but it merely twisted around and took on a blurry quality. The golden fist passed right through the winged figure's head, but it was as if the fist had struck nothing but thin air. Only then did the blurry humanoid figure disintegrate into nothingness. And Lee immediately turned around before casting his gaze toward a nearby patch of space with his brows slightly furrowed. Spatial fluctuations erupted from that patch of space, and the winged figure re-emerged before meeting Han Li's gaze with a cold one of her own. The winged figure was none other than the winged devilish woman, but there was a completely identical figure standing right next to the elderly man at this moment. This is the first time I've seen a body integration stage being with such exceptional illusionary and concealment abilities. If it weren't for my spirit eyes and spiritual sense, I would have been fooled into thinking that you hadn't done anything, Han Li said in a calm voice as he suddenly pointed a finger toward the winged woman beside the elderly man. A bolt of golden lightning shot forth from his fingertip and struck the winged woman's body in a flash, upon which she instantly disintegrated into specks of white light, revealing the woman to have been nothing more than an illusion. Both the elderly man and the true winged woman's expressions changed slightly upon seeing this, and the latter said in a cold voice, "You may have survived this attack, but what about the next one?" Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this before chuckling in response. "Oh, are you planning to use the same attack against me again? Do you think it'll still work?" "I do indeed plan to use the same attack again." A hint of killing intent appeared in the woman's eyes as she abruptly flapped her wings, and her body vanished yet again. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations erupted on the other side of Han Li, and she re-emerged before reaching toward him with a pair of hands that had transformed into sharp black claws. Han Li immediately swept a sleeve through the air upon seeing this to release a streak of azure sword chi to slice the winged woman's body in half, but it merely vanished, revealing itself to be nothing more than another projection. Right at this moment, spatial fluctuations erupted on the other side, and the winged woman appeared again in a wraith-like manner before unleashing countless claw projections toward Han Li. In response, Han Li turned his head in an expressionless manner before opening his mouth to release a bolt of golden lightning that struck the winged woman, but it merely pierced through her body, revealing it to be yet another projection. All of a sudden, the winged woman emerged above Han Li's head, then flapped her wings to send countless streaks of black light raining down from above. Thus, with her incredible movement techniques, the winged woman was able to appear over and over again all around Han Li and unleash all types of attacks against him, while her own body remained completely unharmed. Interesting. You teleport away as soon as you complete an attack and only leave behind a projection to fool the enemy. This is a very intriguing tactic, but I'm afraid it's not going to be effective against me, Han Li mused in an intrigued voice as blue light flashed within his eyes. All of a sudden, the Provenance True Devil projection behind him raised its 6 arms in unison, and a giant golden sword appeared in each of its hands before being slashed through the air to oppose all of the oncoming attacks. The winged woman merely ignored this and continued to phase in and out of existence around Han Li. On top of that, she was growing faster and faster, and her attacks were also becoming more and more ferocious. It was as if Han Li were being attacked by multiple people at once. However, Han Li remained as calm as ever, and after negotiating several waves of attacks, a cold smile appeared on his face as he flipped a hand over to summon a small black mountain amid a flash of black light. However, before he had a chance to unleash the extreme mountain, his expression suddenly changed slightly as countless arcs of golden lightning erupted from his body to form a golden lightning robe. Almost at the exact same moment, the faint blood mist wafting through the air around him formed countless crimson threads once again before hurtling directly toward Han Li. If he hadn't detected what was happening in advance, he really would have fallen prey to this sneak attack. As things currently were, he merely injected more magic power into his lightning robe, which swelled drastically in size to meet the oncoming crimson threads. The golden lightning robe flashed erratically, and the crimson threads all exploded upon coming into contact with it. Clouds of blood mist permeated through the air once again, and the mist quickly became extremely viscous, with countless crimson runes flashing within it. The elderly man was elated to see this, and he hurriedly yelled, "Fairy Ling, hurry and use that ability." "HMPH, I would have done so even if you hadn't said anything," the winged woman replied in a cold voice, as 7 identical winged women suddenly appeared in the air around the blood mist. As soon as these 7 devilish women appeared, they rubbed their hands together in unison to produce a reddish-black devilish flag each before tossing them into the air above the blood mist. The 7 flags were only around 10 feet in length, but there was a bright red devilish formation engraved onto the surface of each flag, and they instantly transformed into 7 reddish-black balls of light that began to rapidly revolve through the air. Right at this moment, the 7 devilish women began to chant an incantation while rapidly flicking incantation seals toward the devilish flags. In the next instant, 7 dull thumps rang out, and the flags abruptly vanished, replaced by 7 reddish-black light formations that appeared above the blood mist. At the center of each formation was a ball of crimson devilish flames. Chapter 2172, Battle of the Wood Tribe 11. The 7 winged women let loose a collective delicate cry, and crimson magma-like liquid instantly poured out of all 7 formations. The liquid quickly spread over the vast expanse of blood mist, forming a sea of ferocious flames. However, what was quite strange was that the sea of flames was giving off a frosty sensation, rather than scorching heat. The 7 formations began to swell drastically amid a flash of light before combining as one, forming an ancient seal character that was around an acre in size before descending toward the sea of flames. In the instant that the rune entered the sea of flames, it vanished into the fire as specks of spiritual light. In the next instant, countless specks of light surged out of the sea of flames in a frenzy, forming a reddish-black light barrier that sealed the entire sea of fire beneath it. Countless runes surged over the surface of the light barrier and fluctuated erratically in size, presenting a mysterious sight to behold. The elation on the elderly man's face became even more pronounced upon seeing this, and he immediately rushed over to the air above the sea of flames. After that, he opened his mouth to expel a ball of white light, which landed in his hand to reveal a white jade vial that was around a foot in size. The elderly man then raised the vial up with both hands while chanting something, and a burst of scorching white flames instantly surged forth, transforming into 3 white fiery worms that plunged straight through the light barrier and into the sea of fire. The 3 fiery worms blasted bursts of white flames out of their mouths, and the sea of flames began to burn with even greater ferocity. At this moment, the 7 winged women and the elderly man all sat down with their legs crossed and closed their eyes while making a series of hand seals. Ferocious waves of fire were swept up within the sea of flames at their behest, and countless balls of flames exploded as the 3 fiery worms threatened to tear through and incinerate everything. If a normal cultivator were to fall into this sea of flames, they would most likely be instantly reduced to ashes. However, Han Li's calm voice rang out from within the sea of fire only a short while later. "Is this all you've got? It's not that impressive." The elderly man and 7 devilish women were stunned to hear this, and they all opened their eyes before turning their attention toward the sea of flames. All of a sudden, a clear cry rang out from within the sea of fire, and a silver fire raven that was several tens of feet in size emerged before flying toward the light barrier up above. The fire raven had shimmering silver feathers that were burning with silver flames, and was extremely dazzling to behold. The elderly man's expression darkened upon seeing this, and he immediately pointed a finger toward the sea of flames. The 3 fiery worms instantly rose up into the heavens at his behest, then pounced directly toward the fire raven. The silver fire raven seemed to have sensed the threat that was approaching it from behind, and it quickly swiveled around before swooping toward the 3 fiery worms in retaliation. Thus, a vicious battle ensued between the 2 sides, and scales and feathers came raining down from above. The silver fire raven displayed no fear despite the face that it was facing 3 opponents, and it firmly held the upper hand. Right at this moment, golden light flashed within the sea of fire, and 6 thick pillars of light erupted forth before striking the reddish-black light barrier. An earth-shattering boom rang out as balls of golden light exploded on the light barrier, and most of the runes on the surface of the light barrier were instantly eradicated. Letter 1D557, letter 1D42B, letter 1D41E, letter 1D556, letter 1D568, letter 1D41E, letter 1D41C, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D696. However, the expressions of the seven-winged women remained completely unchanged upon seeing this, and they opened their mouths in unison to expel a mouthful of blood essence each. The blood essence instantly transformed into 7 bursts of blood mist that infused themselves into the light barrier, upon which the barrier was instantly stabilized, while the eradicated runes also returned. A cold harumph rang out from within the sea of flames, and countless streaks of azure sword chi struck the light barrier like a torrential storm. In the face of this ferocious barrage, the light barrier flashed violently and began to dim significantly, as if it were about to shatter at any moment. The elderly man's expression darkened upon seeing this, and he swept a sleeve through the air to release a silver ring, which expanded at a rapid rate, forming a giant halo with a diameter of around half a kilometer before slowly descending from above. The air down below instantly became extremely viscous, and the light barrier was able to regain its stability. "Let's see how much longer you can trap me." Han Li's cold voice rang out again, and as soon as his voice trailed off, an inhuman roar rang out deep within the sea of flames, following which a terrifying aura erupted into the heavens. The elderly man's expression changed drastically upon sensing this aura, yet before he had a chance to do anything, the entire sea of flames shuddered before parting to reveal a massive golden-furred fist. Countless golden fist projections were unleashed by the giant fist, all of which combined as one to form a shimmering golden pavilion-sized fist projection that struck the light barrier up above with a resounding boom. In the next instant, a scintillating golden sun erupted beneath the light barrier, and an enormous burst of force exploded in all directions. On this occasion, even with the assistance of the 7 winged women and the massive halo, the reddish-black light barrier still completely shattered. The sea of flames down below was also torn apart, and a shimmering golden humanoid figure rose up into the air before immediately attempting to fly away. The elderly man's expression darkened even further upon seeing this, and he switched to a different hand seal before stabbing a finger downward in a vicious manner. "Restrict." The giant halo began to rotate at a rapid rate at his behest, then descended toward the golden humanoid figure. In response, the golden figure let loose a thunderous roar, then lashed out with successive blows from both of its fists toward the massive halo. A pair of loud booms rang out, and 2 gusts of ferocious winds rose up, forcing the descending halo to a complete standstill. During this split-second delay, the golden humanoid figure vanished into thin air. The elderly man's heart jolted upon seeing this, and he immediately pointed a finger up toward the white jade vial that was hovering above his head. The jade vial instantly tipped itself over, releasing a burst of white flames that formed a fiery barrier that shielded him within. At the same time, the elderly man made a hand seal, and the giant insect projection reappeared behind him. "HMPH, you've got decent reactions." Spatial fluctuations erupted up above, and a golden humanoid figure emerged, revealing itself to be a giant golden ape that was several tens of feet tall. As soon as the ape emerged, one of its arms swelled drastically in size, and it reached down toward the elderly man's head in a vicious manner. Meanwhile, a massive golden sword appeared in its other hand, and the sword was slashed downward like lightning. The elderly man's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and the crimson insect projection behind him instantly opened its mouth at his behest, biting toward the oncoming golden hand. At the same time, the white jade vial transformed into a ball of white light that surged directly toward the golden sword. Han Li chuckled coldly upon seeing this, and countless golden arcs of lightning erupted out of his massive hand amid a loud thunderclap, while the hand itself expanded to several times its original size. A thump and a clang rang out in unison, and the huge insect projection was instantly destroyed by the giant golden hand. However, the golden sword was repelled by the white jade vial, while the vial itself remained completely unscathed. The elderly man drew a sharp breath upon seeing this, and he immediately swept a sleeve upward, upon which the fiery barrier around him transformed into a fiery worm that pounced toward the descending hand. The two clashed, and the golden hand tore through the fiery worm's head, but the worm instantly split up into several fiery snakes that wound themselves tightly around the hand. Golden lightning flashed violently around the hand to destroy one of the fiery snakes, but the remaining snakes prevented the hand from descending any further. However, right at this moment, a peculiar smile suddenly appeared on Han Li's face. At the same time, spatial fluctuations erupted on either side of the elderly man, and a green figure emerged alongside a golden figure with 3 heads and 6 arms. The green figure opened its mouth to release a green net of threads, while the golden figure raised its 6 hands, revealing 6 balls of golden light, which were thrust directly toward the elderly man's back. With the elderly man's powers, he was naturally able to detect what was happening behind himself, but most of his magic power was focused on the attack he had just unleashed upward, leaving him ill-equipped to defend himself. In this dire situation, a pair of white bone tridents flew out of his shoulders amid a flash of white light, flying directly toward the pair of humanoid figures. At the same time, the protective spiritual light around his body became around twice as dense as it had previously been. However, neither the green figure nor the golden figure took evasive measures in the face of the oncoming bone tridents. A pair of loud cracks rang out as white light erupted from their bodies, and one of them shuddered before taking 2 involuntarily steps backward, while the other merely swayed slightly, but remained standing on the spot. Most of the bone trident directed toward the green figure had embedded itself into its target's body, but was unable to advance any further. Meanwhile, the other trident had simply bounced off the body of the golden figure. Jade 2173, Battle of the Wood Tribe 12. The 6 balls of golden light struck the elderly man's protective spiritual chi like lightning, and all 6 balls of light exploded into golden shockwaves that swept over the elderly man's body. His protective spiritual light possessed defensive power equivalent to that of top-grade treasures, but it was still instantly destroyed. The elderly man gritted his teeth before biting off half of his own tongue, then expelled a ball of blood essence backward to form a crimson shield. The golden light struck the crimson shield with devastating force, and the shield only managed to stop it momentarily before part of the golden light forced its way through and rammed into the elderly man's body. The elderly man felt a burst of enormous force crash into his back, and he was forced to stumble forward a few steps and throw up several mouthfuls of reddish-black blood as his consciousness threatened to fade. Right at this moment, Han Li suddenly stepped forward, and his giant ape body blurred before appearing right in front of the elderly man, following which he extended a golden hand forward like lightning. The elderly man was greatly alarmed by this, and he immediately tried to evade, but it was already too late. The fingers of the golden hand split apart before plunging through the elderly man's chest, emerging on the other side with a heart locked in its grasp. Silver flames then erupted along the entire arm, incinerating the elderly man's body and heart into ashes. Even his nascent soul didn't get a chance to escape. Thus, the elderly man was killed in the blink of an eye, and a hint of fear appeared on the faces of the 7 winged women upon seeing this. The 7 of them immediately flapped their wings in unison, flying away in 7 different directions with no intention of engaging in this battle any further. "Do you really think your clone technique can fool me?" Han Li chuckled coldly as blue light flashed through his eyes, and he quickly swept his gaze toward the 7 fleeing streaks of light. A pair of massive translucent wings then appeared on his back amid a loud thunderclap, and he flapped them vigorously to conjure up countless balls of lightning. A loud thunderclap rang out, and all of the balls of lightning exploded while Han Li's enormous body shot forth as an azure and white thread of light. In the blink of an eye, he had covered a distance of several thousand feet and appeared right above one of the winged women. The winged woman's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and she immediately attempted to use a secret technique to accelerate even further, but it was already too late. Han Li let loose a thunderous roar, and all of his golden fur stood up on end as he swelled to over 1,000 feet in size. His hands then balled up into a pair of massive fists, which were sent crashing down like a pair of golden shooting stars. An invisible burst of enormous force was released, encompassing an area with a radius of around half a kilometer, and the winged woman was immediately slowed down significantly. The woman's face paled as she let loose a sharp cry, upon which all of the other 6 winged women vanished in a flash. As for the winged woman being attacked by Han Li, her aura instantly swelled by severalfold, and she raised both hands up into the air to send a pair of fist-sized black balls flying upward. She then flapped her wings upward as well, and countless feathers swept forth as streaks of black light. As soon as the pair of black balls struck the 2 giant golden fists, they exploded into a pair of black suns that quickly swept over an area of around an acre. The streaks of black light also flew into the black suns like speeding arrows, and the fearsome aura descending from above eased slightly, while the pressure weighing down upon the woman was also somewhat alleviated. The winged woman was elated by this development, and she immediately continued to flee the scene. However, she had only flown for less than 200 feet when the space above her was torn open. Golden and silver light flashed in unison, and a giant golden fist that was enshrouded in silver flames came crashing down from the heavens. The winged woman was greatly alarmed by this, and she immediately opened her mouth to release a small green shield, which instantly expanded to several tens of feet in size before positioning itself above her. At the same time, she enveloped her own body with her wings, which transformed into a suit of extremely intricate armor that encapsulated every single inch of her skin. The green shield instantly exploded amid a resounding boom, and the winged woman came plummeting down from above after being struck by the golden fist. A human-shaped crater that was around 10 feet deep was smashed into the ground, and the winged woman was embedded into the earth. Her body had become completely numb and powerless from the impact, thereby rendering her temporarily immobilized. Fierce winds swept through the air up above, and the pair of black suns were snuffed out in the blink of an eye. Thus, the giant ape was revealed once again, but its appearance had completely changed. Currently, it had a layer of golden scales over its skin, a horn on the top of its head, and an inky black demonic eye on its glabella. Holy Nirvana physique. The winged woman was petrified at the sight of the giant ape's new form, but the golden ape showed her no mercy as it thrust a massive palm down from above. The earth within a radius of around half a kilometer tremored violently amid a resounding boom, and all of the trees within the area were pulverized as a giant handprint that was around an acre in area was imprinted onto the ground. At the center of the giant handprint was the winged woman, and she didn't even get a chance to cry out before her body was reduced to mincemeat, and her nascent soul was erased from existence. Having destroyed his final opponent, Han Li made a hand seal and quickly reverted back to his human form. He looked down with a cold expression, then waved a hand through the air while pointing at something with his other hand. A storage bracelet instantly rose up from the ground before landing in his grasp, and at the same time, a silver ball of flames gently drifted down from above. The woman's remains were instantly engulfed by silver flames and incinerated into nothingness, while a green humanoid figure suddenly appeared beside Han Li before handing over another storage bracelet and a white jade vial to him in a respectful manner. This was none other than the spirit body, which was being controlled by Quirr and had been deployed to launch a sneak attack against the elderly man. As for Han Li's Provenance golden body, that had already been drawn back into his body once he adopted his holy Nirvana physique. Han Li quickly inspected the contents of the two storage bracelets with his spiritual sense before stowing them away alongside the white jade vial. After that, a burst of golden light erupted from his body to sweep up the spirit body before he flew away as a streak of light. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D667, letter 1D65A, letter 1D486, letter 1D66C, letter 1D65A. Letter 1D658, letter 1D664, letter 1D662. At Han Li's current speed, a distance of less than 10,000 kilometers could be covered in virtually the blink of an eye. Following the deaths of the elderly man and the winged woman, the petite woman who was battling the giant golden crab close to 10,000 kilometers away immediately sensed something and exclaimed, "I've lost contact with Brother Shi. Something must have happened to them. We have to get away from here." As soon as her voice trailed off, she immediately withdrew her treasures, then swept a sleeve through the air to release a streak of golden light, which instantly transformed into a golden wheel that was around 10 feet in size. The wheel then transformed into a ball of golden light that enveloped her body before flying away at an incredible speed. The golden-armored man and three-eyed devilish being also became quite panicked upon hearing this, and the former immediately unleashed thousands of balls of black lightning to bombard the giant crab before also fleeing in another direction as a streak of light. As for the latter, he hurriedly detonated a pair of flying daggers that were being used to attack the golden crab, then released a green flying sword, which he instantly leaped onto before flying away. Arcs of lightning flashed over the golden crab's body to repel the oncoming attacks with ease, and it said in a completely emotionless voice, "I'm afraid I can't let you leave, fellow Taoists." As soon as its voice trailed off, a peculiar silver diagram suddenly appeared on its back, then rose up as a vast expanse of silver light that instantly vanished into thin air. In the next instant, ferocious winds and dark clouds swept through the area as a lightning formation that was around 100 acres in size emerged, Countless bolts of lightning then came crashing down from above, encompassing everything below the entire formation. The three fleeing devilish beings were greatly alarmed by this, and they had no choice but to stop and defend themselves. However, there was simply no end to the lightning raining down from above, and even though these three devils were far more powerful than normal body integration stage beings, they could only just barely ensure self-preservation. Having said that, Taoist Zai clearly wouldn't be able to maintain such a powerful barrage for much time. Sure enough, the thunderclaps abated after the span of just a few breaths had passed, following which the lightning formation crumbled, and the lightning flashing through the sky receded. The three devilish beings were ecstatic to see this, and they were just about to continue to flee when a cold male voice suddenly rang out up above. "Where are you going, fellow Taoists? I've returned to send you on your way." Spatial fluctuations erupted overhead, and a faint azure humanoid figure emerged before casting a frosty gaze toward the three devils. Chapter 2174, Battle of the Wood Tribe 13. Less than an hour later, a burst of buzzing rang out, and a green formation plate emerged in Han Li's grasp amid a flash of azure light. Han Li cast an incantation seal into the formation plate, and he was immediately greeted by the sound of Cao Jai's elated voice. "How are things going on your end, Brother Han? I've already prepared the restriction. You can lure the sacred ancestor clones into the mountain range, and I'll trap them using the restriction." "There's no need for that. Save the restriction for the next group of enemies. Everything has already been taken care of on my end," Han Li replied in a calm voice as he inspected a black axe with an intrigued expression. The axe was none other than the weapon used by the golden-armored devilish being. At this point, aside from Taoist Zai and the severely wounded spirit body, there was no one else in the area aside from Han Li. However, the ground down below had been severely ravaged, and it was clear that an extremely fierce battle had just taken place. "What? You don't mean?" Cao Jai's voice was filled with disbelief and bewilderment as he came to realize what Han Li's words entailed. "Brother Zai and I have already taken care of the sacred ancestor clones, so save your restriction for later," Han Li replied with a smile as he stowed the black axe away. Indeed, he and Taoist Zai had defeated the three remaining devils with ease, but the trio was determined to get away, so it had taken some time to hunt them down and kill them. "You and Brother Zai are truly unfathomable to the likes of myself. With your presence, our second formation core will be safe for sure," Cao Jai said as a hint of elation and veneration crept into his voice. It was clear that he had been overawed by Han Li's display of power and no longer dared to regard him as an equal. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face, and he was just about to respond when a string of dull thunderclaps suddenly rang out up above. White light then began to flash erratically in the air, following which bursts of energy fluctuation swept through the area. Almost at the exact same moment, a cry of alarm rang out from the formation plate. "Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D633, letter 212F, letter 212F, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D4B7, letter 1D450, letter 2134, letter 1D4FA." Han Li's smile stiffened upon seeing this, and he asked, "Fellow Taoist Cao, has the first formation core just been destroyed as well?" "Indeed, that's what the backup holy tree is telling me, Brother Han. As expected, those sacred ancestor clones have gone after all three formation cores at once," Cao Jai replied with a hint of bitterness in his voice. "I see. In that case, we'll most likely be welcoming a second group of guests soon," Han Li chuckled coldly in response. "Brother Han, come back with fellow Taoist Zai to rest and recuperate. If more sacred ancestor clones arrive at our formation core, you'll be the only ones who can oppose them, so it would be best to take this time to recover some magic power," Cao Jai suggested. "That's a good idea. Fellow Taoist Zai and I will be returning right away," Han Li agreed with a nod. After that, he stowed his formation plate away and departed from the scene with Taoist Zai, heading directly toward the center of the mountain range. At the sight of their battle that had just taken place, lush greenery suddenly began to grow all over the severely ravaged earth. Countless trees grew rapidly at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye, forming a massive forest that erased all signs of the battle that had just been. Less than half a day later, a burst of rumbling suddenly rang out tens of thousands of kilometers away, following which a burst of black chi emerged in the distance before heading directly toward the mountain range. Within this cloud of black chi was a mountainous inky black hall, atop which was a platform where 7 devilish beings in different attire were standing and communicating with one another. All 7 of them were giving off extremely powerful auras, clearly indicating that they weren't ordinary devilish lords either. Old Man Shi and the others really are useless. Both of our groups have already succeeded, yet there's been no news from them at all. Now we have to take care of business in their stead. A burly devilish man with blue light emanating from all over his body grumbled in a displeased voice. In terms of power, fellow Taoist Shi's group isn't much less powerful than the 7 of us. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been tasked with destroying a formation core on their own. It's most likely the case that they've been trapped by some type of powerful restriction, and that's why they still haven't succeeded. A beauty in a palatial dress replied with a smile. HMPH, both of our groups have already succeeded with ease. It's still a sign of incompetence that they've still yet to complete their objective. The burly devilish man countered with a roll of his eyes. It would be a good thing if they've actually simply been trapped. I'm just concerned that they may have fallen by the hands of powerful enemies. If that were the case, then we'll have to be careful as well, a yellow-haired elderly man said in a cold voice. Surely that's not possible. With their powers, they should at least be able to ensure self-preservation as long as they don't encounter any Grand Ascension stage beings. As for why we've been unable to get into contact with them, that's most likely due to the effects of this formation, the woman in the palatial dress said with a nonchalant smile. In any case, the people guarding this restriction were able to obstruct Old Man Shi and the others, so it couldn't hurt to proceed with caution. The elderly man continued in an expressionless manner. All right, then let's keep our guards up. Another devilish being chimed in, and everyone else nodded in agreement. The yellow-haired elderly man was just about to say something else when his expression suddenly changed drastically, and he immediately cast his gaze upward. What is it, fellow Taoist Jai? The burly devilish man couldn't help but ask. However, before the elderly man had a chance to reply, an incredibly fearsome burst of energy fluctuations erupted in the air, and an azure light barrier appeared before descending from above like a gigantic net. Everyone look out! The elderly man yelled as he transformed into a huge yellow falcon, which flapped its wings vigorously and flew away from the hall as a ball of yellow light. The other 6 devilish beings were also very alarmed and scattered in different directions as well. The azure light barrier descending from above was over 100 acres in size and was falling at an astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, it had swept up 4 of the devilish beings who hadn't managed to escape out of its scope. The 3 devilish beings who had escaped in time immediately began to unleash attacks to save their companions. But in the instant that the light barrier enveloped the 4 devilish beings, it transformed into a gargantuan ball of light before flying away and vanishing into the distance in a flash. The 3 devilish beings outside faltered slightly upon seeing this before flaring up with rage and setting off in pursuit. But spatial fluctuations suddenly erupted from up above once again, and 2 figures, one golden and one azure, appeared directly in the path of the 3 devilish beings. Thus, the 3 devils were forced to stop in their tracks as they appraised the pair of humanoid figures with wary expression. The 2 people who had just arrived were naturally none other than Han Li and Taoist Zai, and the former said in a cold voice, "Seeing as you 3 managed to escape the restriction, I'll send you on your way myself. Rest assured, we'll take care of your companions as well after we put you 3 to rest, so you won't be lonely." As soon as his voice trailed off, Han Li laid a hand onto the top of his own head, and a shimmering golden nascent soul emerged. Immediately thereafter, 5 golden balls of light flew out of his body before transforming into 5 projections, consisting of a giant ape, a colorful phoenix, a silver bird, a peacock, and a golden dragon. The nascent soul swept a hand through the air without any hesitation, and the 5 true spirit projections vanished into its body in a flash. A resounding boom rang out, and Han Li and the nascent soul vanished in unison amid a flash of golden light, only to be replaced by a huge humanoid figure. The humanoid figure's entire body was of a shimmering golden color, and the entirety of its skin was covered in a layer of golden scales. There was a single azure horn on its head, and an inky black demonic eye on its glabella. Han Li had unleashed his holy nirvana physique from the get-go, while Taoist Zai also adopted his original giant crab form amid flashes of silver lightning. The 3 devilish beings' expressions immediately darkened significantly upon seeing this. Several hours later, the first formation core had already been completely inundated by devilish chi, and there were countless armored devilish warriors assembled beneath it. In the air above these devilish warriors, a group of high-grade devilish beings were hovering in midair with grim expressions. We've lost contact with fellow Taoist Jai's group as well. It looks like there really is something fishy about the second formation core. Otherwise, there's no way that we would lose contact with both groups, a young man in a suit of intricate black armor said. Chapter 2175, Abrupt Chain. In that case, there's no need to send any more people to that formation core. It must be guarded by powerful beings that are too much for us to handle, a devilish being enshrouded within green chi said with furrowed brows. Indeed, even though we're unable to destroy the last formation core, the destruction of 2 formation cores will have severely debilitated the formation, so many of our high-grade brethren should be able to survive. As long as we can preserve our elite forces, it's not much of an issue even if we lose all of our low-grade subordinates. With our power, it would be easy to replenish them, and we're only acting as a decoy for Master Tun Tian anyway. As long as Master Tun Tian succeeds, our holy race will be able to claim a territory for itself in the spirit realm. The young man agreed with a nod. But the powerful beings guarding the second formation core can't just be ignored. As a safety precaution, let's set up the dazzling devilish flame formation here. With that super formation to protect us, we'll be able to contend with even a grand ascension stage being. We can also order our elite forces to gather in the formation to preserve their numbers as much as possible. If we can hold out until Master Tun Tian succeeds, then we'll have completed our objective, a dark-skinned devilish man said. That's a good idea. Following the destruction of the formation core, this place has become the weakest part of this formation, so it would be an ideal place to set up our super formation. Leave it to me. I've brought along sufficient formation materials with me, the devilish being within the green chi said. The young man was ecstatic to hear this, and he decided, with your expertise on hand, I'm sure we'll have no issues setting up the formation. As for the rest of us, let's split up and urge our brethren to gather here. The other devilish beings had no objections to this, and thus, all of them sprang into action. Meanwhile, the devilish warriors down below began to set up the super formation, under the instructions of the devilish being within the green chi. After no more than half a day had passed, a massive formation with an area of over 100 kilometers was already beginning to take shape. During this time, groups of elite devilish beings had flocked to the site from all directions, and it didn't take long for their numbers to exceed 1 million. Right at this moment, the Wood Realm 36 Extremes formation had finally accumulated sufficient energy, and a rumbling boom rang out as a second wave of restriction attacks swept through the entire formation. All of the devilish beings situated elsewhere suffered severe casualties in the face of the attacks, but those gathered in the new super formation at the original site of the first formation core were largely spared, and this instilled the devilish army with a lot of confidence. Of course, in the face of the restriction attacks, the devilish beings didn't dare to initiate any attacks. All they could do was stabilize their own super formation with all their might. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D486, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A, letter 1D658, letter 1D664, letter 1D662. Thus, roughly once every 2 days, the Wood Realm formation would gather sufficient energy for a new wave of attacks, and as the number of devilish beings within the formation was quickly reduced, the power of the restrictions began to converge toward the original site of the first formation core. Following several rounds of attacks, even the devilish beings within the super formation began to suffer severe casualties. Around half a month later, the original devilish army in the super formation that had numbered in excess of 1 million had been reduced to only 80,000. However, those who had managed to survive were all high-grade devilish beings, and even the weakest ones among them were at the deity transformation stage. The high-grade devilish beings gathered there also comprised the majority of the surviving devilish beings within the entire Wood Realm formation. On a giant mountain within the Wood Realm formation, Elder Han of the Wood Tribe was standing on a tall platform, appraising a light screen with an anxious expression. There were countless specks of light all over the light screen, and they were constantly changing positions, while the screen itself also flashed erratically. Round the formation beneath the light screen sat 8 elderly Wood Tribe men, all of whom appeared to be extremely frail, and their eyes were closed as they rapidly made a series of different hand seals. These were none other than the 8 Wood Spirit disciples. All of a sudden, the light screen shattered amid a dull thump, and the 8 elderly men let loose muffled groans in unison. Immediately thereafter, they threw up several mouthfuls of blood, following which black blood began to gush out of all of their orifices, and they fell dead onto the ground. The 8 wood spirit disciples had suffered backlash from their divination, and their life forces had instantly run out. Elder Hand's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and a hint of grief flashed through his eyes as he immediately waved a hand. Around a dozen wood tribe guards quickly strode onto the platform, before carefully carrying the bodies of the 8 wood spirit disciples away. Almost at the exact same moment, 8 more wood tribe men who appeared to be in their 50s or 60s replaced the 8 wood spirit disciples and sat down at the exact spots where they had just perished. The 8 seniors have already given their lives for the sake of our race, so the burden of divination will fall upon you now. Please put in your best effort, Elder Hand said as he cupped his fist in a solemn salute. Rest assured, Elder Hand, our divination abilities may be inferior to those of our seniors, but we'll be sure to do our best, one of the 8 wood tribe men replied. Elder Hand nodded in response before gesturing for them to begin. Thus, the 8 new wood tribe men also began to make a series of hand seals, and spiritual light flashed within the formation, following which the light screen reappeared. However, the divination had only progressed for around 15 minutes when a high-grade wood tribe being suddenly rushed onto the platform, then delivered a jade slip to Elder Han in a panicked manner. Elder Han, we've received urgent news from Cottonwood City, stating that high-grade devilish beings have infiltrated the city and our holy land. Elder Han was already in an extremely foul mood in the wake of the 8 wood spirit disciples passing, and this piece of bad news immediately made him flare up with rage. What? How is that possible? Aren't all of the 3 sacred ancestors currently preoccupied? How did something like this happen? What are the guards of Cottonwood City doing? He reached out like lightning to grab onto the jade slip, then adhered it to his own forehead with a furious expression. The other wood tribe elders were also astonished by this news, and they all turned to stare intently at Elder Han. After the span of just a few breaths, the fury on Elder Han's face vanished, only to be replaced with complete despair, and it was as if all of his energy had seeped out of his body. Let me see. One of the wood tribe elders couldn't wait any longer and rushed over to Elder Han before taking the jade slip from him, then also injected his spiritual sense into it. Moments later, this wood tribe elder's face also completely paled, and he murmured to himself in a trance-like state, "The holy tree has been destroyed. The recuperating grand elder has also been killed. It's over. It's completely over for our wood tribe." The other elders' expressions changed drastically upon hearing this, and they passed the jade slip around to inspect its contents for themselves. Even though they were already mentally prepared, seeing the news in the jade slip still dealt all of the elders a heavy blow, and 2 of them almost fainted on the spot. All right, the tragedy has already taken place, so panicking now won't do us any good. Let's think about what we need to do next. Our wood tribe will no longer be able to maintain independence in the spirit realm, but we have tens of billions of brethren that we must find homes for, Elder Han said through gritted teeth as he suddenly rose to his feet. Even though his complexion was still deathly pale, he had managed to recover some of his former composure. The other elders exchanged a few glances before mustering up the energy to chime in agreement. Indeed, we still have several backup holy trees. As long as we can ensure the continuation of our race, a grand ascension stage being could emerge among us in the future, and we'll have a chance to regain our independence. What we have to do now is keep this a secret, then devise a plan to protect all of our brethren. Thus, the elders began to hatch a plan with grim looks on their faces. 3 days later, in the air above a dense forest, a group of people, including Han Li, was quickly flying through the air. The group was currently situated millions of kilometers away from the Wood Realm formation, and only half a day ago was he and Fei Xiaoxi informed by Cao Jai of the fact that the Wood tribe's holy tree had been destroyed, and that their grand elder had been killed. At this point, most of the Wood tribe army had already retreated out of the formation, and the panel of Wood tribe elders had decided to detonate the entire formation, using the power of the second formation core to kill as many devilish beings as possible. Thankfully, the panel of elders had notified the high-grade beings among their allied races in advance. Otherwise, they would have been caught up in the explosion as well. Now that the holy tree and grand elder of the Wood tribe were both gone, there was no point in continuing this battle. Thus, Han Li departed from the Second Formation Corps with some human cultivators who had assisted the Wood Tribe in guarding the formation, and set course to return to Cottonwood City. Presumably, the armies of all of the other races would also immediately retreat upon hearing this news.